Okay, hi. Today I'm going to finish what I had talked about yesterday. This out. Again, it's the whole Camelot you know, Camelot gone bust, you know, the reality versus the fantasy, with all sorts of different, doing parallel of Victoria, Queen Victoria and all of her children, and then the Kennedy family in the United States. And how this is led to the rise of the Second Reich, the Third Reich, and now we're into the Fourth Reich. And it's the descendants, the generations, upon generations of these families who rose to power during the Gilded Age, the 1800s, Industrial Revolution, and that kind of took over, but before that you had the feudal system, the feudal lords, who were vying for power with the monarchs. However, that was over agrarian issues. And the industrialists, as much as the feudalist agrarians were predatory and exploitative of their workers, the industrialists have just gotten worse. And the techie liberals have just joined the bandwagon in the rise of the Fourth Reich. And this, this was something I guess I'll repeat a lot, because it is true today. This was President Woodrow Wilson. So not just friends, conspiracy theorists have spoken out about hidden control in the world. President, and every time somebody just goes, that's just a conspiracy theory, I'm like, okay, could I get your name, please? I'm going to check into you, and I'm going to put you on the list of the violent extremists who need to be investigated for your gobbledygook. Because what planet do you live on that you think everybody's playing nice here? Because it's not true. This doggy dog world rat race, and everyone for himself, and may the most Machiavellian amongst us end up at the top of the heap. And you can't have a democracy. That's a dictatorship. However we want to dress it up. So as President Woodrow Wilson, who was intimately connected with conspiratorial power, once wrote, some of the biggest men in the United States in the field of commerce and manufacture are afraid of somebody, or afraid of something. They know there is a power somewhere so organized, so substantial, so watchful, so interlocked, so complete, so pervasive, that they had better not speak above their breath when they speak in condemnation of it. See, this is where the wives and the women come in, because these women will come in and say anything they want. And a lot of times the men can yeah, okay, yeah, women, you can't control what they say. And they say, save their skins and their wives' skins like that. But as well, it is the women who say what is what, and what's going to fly and what's not going to fly, and the definitions of pedophilia, which does not include underage prostitutes coming out 20 years later or so saying, oh, raped. That little girl is sitting there like the cat who ate the canary. Look at me, look at me. She should be ashamed of herself, but she's stuck on a podium to bring Prince Andrew down. And this is where, and the monarchs have failed since Queen Victoria's era, but this is where the monarchy, the aristocracy, the ruling elite, as I say, used to be the feudal system, the agrarian, and it was, much more closed knit. We've had a globalization, not just since Victoria, this dates back to Elizabeth I. Columbus and So of course, the problems have just become more convoluted in terms of political issues, but the fundamental issues are still the same. And this is where, and this is what my letter to Prince Charles after Trump entered office, and as I say, parallels the olive branch petition of founding father John Dickinson in last-ditch efforts to avoid a war with Britain. Obviously wasn't successful, but one of the reasons was the people around King George weren't doing their jobs and too busy, with their power games. King George, that's it. This is King George III. That because he ended his life mentally ill. It's not clear. I'd have to really do some digging and get people who have looked into those documents, historians, to really find out what that was all about, because there's just been this whole wacko stuff going on within the mental health field since its commencement under Freud. And Lundy Bancroft talks about that. That's particularly with the pedophiles, that the hysteria that Freud was finding amongst his patients, which were of the upper class and upper crust. Many of these women had been victims of sexual abuse as children, and mainly by fathers, people of the close to the family. And that was just, scandalized within the psychiatric community, and I'm sure their wives. But the whole, you can't say that about the upper crust people. So that's when it was changed to the Oedipus and Electress, complex syndrome, whatever it's called. And which is absolutely ridiculous if you know anything about early childhood development. and what's going on in the courts when these little girls, they're not making it up. They would have no knowledge of many of these things if they had not experienced them. So I'll just leave it right there. But if everybody gets the picture, it's disgusting, and it's reverberated. I mean, as I say, King George III, I have lots of questions there. There's Princess Alice, many of these people who are have said that they had the mental problems. I'm like, wait a second, I wonder if the people around. So anyway, I do deviate, but that is a very important point with King George, and then how it progressed to Queen Victoria, and how she entered in, because that's the German with her started the Windsor line before it had been the Hanover House. So see this, and it's a protection racket, and that's where I go after everybody on RICO. There is a peaceful solution here. The names are out there in all the books, and I collected my own names at within my entourages, whether it be personal or professional, if you can call these people professional, and my activism work. It's all, I have a whole slew of names. I'm like, you people just want to sit around and cash in, schmooze and cruise, and grapple up the ladder of success, and spin your wheels, and while everybody else gets really pissed off out there. I was just listening to Megyn Kelly with this interview with this Tim Kennedy. I was like, Kennedy? No, I mean, he's a Green Beret guy. I mean, obviously of the Kennedy from Ireland, but it's like my family with the Wilcoxes. We've been here for a long time, much longer than the Kennedys, and many different people came over. As with the Dickinson, as with the Paul, all of these early colonial families. I mean, of course, it's easier to move to a new country, particularly when it's a wilderness, when you already have somebody there that you can stay with when you get there. Believe me, I know the problem of going from one country to another, and where I'm going to sleep those first nights. So, let's see. President Franklin D. Roosevelt once wrote, "The real truth of the matter is, as you and I know, that a financial element in the large centers has owned the government ever since the days of Andrew Jackson." And that goes, I keep on quoting Dark Money and the Rise of the Fourth Reich. These people are kind of night and day, I think, in maybe on there, who knows? She's a woman, I'm sure, a feminist. This is a man who is to the left, but I don't think he would agree with the feminists whatsoever. So as I say, I'm all over the map. I don't care which side you're coming from or which angle you're coming from. I know how to read through all of this stuff and put it together, and where's the big picture. I mean, that's what the past 15 years I've been doing. Everybody keeps on saying, you need to specialize, I'm like, no, because what I'm doing is looking at all of the specialists out there and figuring out what the hell is going on. I mean, of course, I entered into this game, or I came back to the game under problems on family courts. That's all been all set up. As I keep on saying, wait a second. I got the court cases to clean this up. And I just keep on building and building and building more court cases. I'm like, I really do not enjoy sitting here for the past 15 years studying and writing and my reports and my letters and soliciting this and soliciting action and soliciting action and soliciting action. I have so many other things that I would prefer doing with my life, and particularly being with my children. Unfortunately, everybody come up against in the past 15 years has made that impossible. And I just wait, pray for the day that I can be reunited with them and get on with my life. But in the meantime, that's why, yeah, people are getting pissed. I'm pissed. Everybody in Washington sitting around going, oh, we love your blogs. You know, schmoozing and wasting taxpayers' money. I'm tired of it, and I know the American people are tired of it. This is something that nobody in Washington can frickin' get into their heads, that somebody would actually be here and come back here for something other than to get invited to their stupid parties. That's the crux of the matter. They just cannot fathom that. That's how the city is just inundated with narcissists who just want to play games, who just want to get on podiums, and who just want to be the center of attention. And anybody who doesn't fit into their little idea of what a person should be is canceled and run out of town. I mean, and the Kennedy family have been one of the dynasty beginning with the rise to power. Joseph Kennedy, PJ Kennedy, was the one who came to the United States well before Prohibition. This was in the late 1800s, but got into on the West it's called the saloons, but the tavern business in Boston, and got involved in politics. He was briefly elected to something, but then I think he realized, and he was right. I realized the same thing when I was up on Capitol Hill. It's not the elected officials who make any changes, and it's a real pain in the ass to go through all of that. I mean, I'm hoping to convince Andrew Cuomo to fight back. I think he's the only one I've seen to date who has the knowledge, the experience, and the leadership ability to take back the American government and implement the things that need to be implemented. Of course, he can't do it alone, but I think he could get the support of the American people, and knows enough of Washington, its institutions, of the American government institutions, to do the job. And I'm willing to, I'll clean up the social world here in a heartbeat. Run all these little cackling hen ladies out of town so fast, it'll make everybody's head spin, and clean Dodge City up. But and of course, why I'm not being given a voice, and everybody wants to protect this status quo that is held together by financial elements in the large centers, which have owned the American government ever since the days of Andrew Jackson. And that is concisely put. And it continues on. The Kennedy family just jumped on board. Oh, I was reading though. I'm going to read about Ethel today, but I had read. It was so sad. John Kennedy Jr., JFK's son. See, if he had lived, I think he had the leadership ability. Had been kept away, hadn't really been raised with I mean, of course he knew his cousins, but it wasn't the clan of the others, and that was Jackie. I mean, my friend Doug Shar, son of Dwight Shar in DC, Northern Virginia homes, real estate mogul, even told me one time, he was like, oh my God, Carolyn and or Caroline and John, the only ones who have any kind of moral compass, and that's because of Jackie. Although Jackie was, Jackie was a dumb, oh gosh, when you hear her talking in public, she sounds like Marilyn Monroe, dumb. At least, Marilyn Monroe was an act. Jackie, I don't think it was so much an act. I mean, okay, it was somewhat of an act, definitely. Somebody even said, oh, well, she didn't speak like that in public, when you were talking to her normally. But still, she was no Einstein. Unfortunately, her daughter, who was the ambassador to Japan during Obama, is up a creek without a paddle in the James Ryan case that I helped with. I don't know where that thing's going, but James told me there's a $300 million lawsuit there. He finally found a lawyer. And my thing is, oh, but this is not coming out of taxpayers' money. This is coming out of the pockets and the hides of the people who work in the consulates and the embassies and the State Department. I have been sending letters and letters and letters and letters up the chain of command, meticulously documenting my, moving up the chain of the command. He's not doing his job. It's your job to make sure that gets done. He's not doing his job. Who's not doing his job? It's your job to get it done. Until I got to Secretary of State. I think Clinton had probably stepped down by the time I had gotten up that high, but she's up creek without a paddle. Then, was it Kerry? I forget. No, Kerry. Was it him? I forget. Anyway, everybody since 2009, and then through the Trump administration. I believe Pompeo, I didn't have time to write a letter, but it was a lost cause, and I'd already made my point with the other ones. So as I say, I've known from the beginning where I had to go, and that was build cases for negligence, stupidity, incompetence against the civil servants within the system who are not doing their jobs. And that's what I've been focused on the entire time. Of course, after I built all of these cases for the courts, international courts, and nobody would submit, well, then I got into awareness raising campaigns. But I'm not doing awareness raising campaigns to make money or fame or fortune or any of that. It's really to raise awareness. And, I can lead a horse to water, but I can't make them drink. And if they don't, then they just become complicit when they have an obligation to act. And even every citizen has an obligation to act. It might be just writing to your congressman and making sure that everybody around you writes to your congressman. Or it can be, there's a problem little bully over there in the schoolyard, and we got to find out because this kid's creating havoc today. When he gets big, he's going to even create more havoc, and there's something going on in his house that's creating this problem. And it is the community's responsibility to, as I say, the higher up you get into positions of power and you want to get and grapple up the ladder of success, and the higher your network of people, your resources at your disposition, the more responsibility you have, not the less responsibility you have, and the more entitlement you should demonstrate. And as we'll see with the Kennedy family, that example was set even by Ted Kennedy and Chappaquiddick for the Kennedy boys and girl. I mean, the entire family just gave, well, we're above the law. And the thing with Ted Kennedy, of course, it wasn't premeditated murder. That's really, really stretching it. That he would intentionally have, driven into what was it, the river, or whatever, the water. Of course not. But obviously what happened, because that was where they went drinking with the young girls, and he didn't want to be caught with their booty calls and their little fresh meat that they all had out there, and driving on, while under the influence, how drunk he was, or whether it was tired, what happened exactly is, but obviously it was an accident. I mean, a preventable accident, but an accident. But of course, no, these narcissistic kids, privileged, entitled kids, they don't know how to deal with anything, nor do their parents or anyone in the entourage, and say, oh gosh, let's just pretend it didn't happen. We'll just pretend it didn't happen and hope nobody knows this. Well, that, a car with a dead girl in it, they're going to notice. That raises eyebrows. And somebody in the community wanting some answers of how this girl ended up there in the car. So, yeah, but see, this is the typical, I mean, if anybody in the family had a brain, wait a second. You do not aggravate if you and even if you couldn't save the girl, I don't know if you tried, even if you couldn't save her, if you run away and even if she's already dead and nobody would have been able to resuscitate her by the time the ambulance got there or whatever, the worst thing you can do is run away. I always saw that with the Brian Laundrie. Very sad case. But again, same deal with the Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie. I do believe it was not premeditated, that it was in that case an argument gone wrong instead of a party and weekend gone wrong. Nobody wants to assume responsibility for anything, even the tiny little things. And I mean, I don't know, I was looking at this Tim Kennedy, he's a special ops Green Beret, and he says, oh yeah, to Megyn Kelly, that's your world. Like, she was talking about at Smith College, how there was a letter for petitioning to have tampons and feminine hygiene machines in the men's room. I mean, what more proof do we need that these feminists have gone absolutely around the bend? My favorite movie, I forget what, it was one of these Green Beret Rambo type, Sylvester Stallone, Schwarzenegger, and the guy's got bloody, they're running away in some hallways and from the bad guys, and total bloody no. The other guy, he pulls out a tampon and he sticks it up the guy's nose, and he said, "This will stop the bleeding." The guy was like horrified to have this woman's product in his nose. Men don't want to see that stuff. I mean, they really don't want to see that machine in their men's bathrooms, their public men's bathrooms. They aren't gonna look at this stuff in their own homes, their wives. 10 ways to lose a guy. One of the tactics that she uses to like drive him batty, is with Matthew McConaughey, is fill the medicine cabinet with Tampax and all sorts, and it like falls on top of it. Oh my Lord, I was like cracking up. I was like, oh, come on, people, when are you gonna wake up? This is crazy. And the Ethel Kennedys, the Kerry Kennedys, the Eunice Kennedys, the Caroline Kennedys, and the Kennedy women, starting with Rose Kennedy, wife of Joseph, have been at the lead on the left. People should not forget that the right's been playing their same games at the same time. And so see, both sides have just been, and this is why the right has let the left, go ahead. I mean, they squabble. Yeah, the people at the, the puppets that they have in the elected positions, but those in control, Koch brothers, DeVos families in there. I forget all of the different families, but there's, you got the rich on the right or the rich on the left, and they're all vying for power and control while the country goes to shit. That's why it is important that the Kennedy family be called out and held to account. I mean, as I keep on saying, with all of these little ladies who are playing games with me in Washington, when I get them into court, and they have to prove this, their declaration, not theory, it's a declaration that they can have it all. And the homemakers and wives should just, go and commit sati if their marriages don't work out, because they're not going to be welcome back in the workplace because they're a threat to the feminists who are power hungry and who don't care about their children and don't care about their husbands and don't care about their families and only care about their pocketbooks. and why I'm not given a voice amongst any of them. And again, Kerry Kennedy, oh my gosh, it's Joseph Kennedy, Joe Kennedy is Ethel Kennedy's eldest son. I was reading about him as well. Now, if he, and we need to sit down and have a little talk, he and I, but if he were put in charge of the Robert F. Kennedy Foundation, I think that it could be a very, very positive influence in Washington. The three, oh gosh, I'll get into that. It's funny. So I'll start on this. But so this is Across the Bear part, and this is again after Camelot book on Ethel. It was a sunny day in August 1969 when Rose Kennedy's secretary, Barbara Gibson, found Ethel Kennedy sitting in the kitchen of her home at the Kennedy compound crying. "Why, what's wrong, Mrs. Kennedy?" she asked. Ethel looked up with reddened eyes and said that Bobby had been gone for a year, and as a result, chaos had broken out in her home. She said that she could not figure out how to handle her children. She had just that morning learned that Bobby Jr. was being intimate with a local girl, and of course, a Catholic and a mother. And as a Catholic and a mother, it was against everything that she believed. Ethel was clearly distressed. "He's 15 and this is what he's doing?" Ethel asked. She then said that she didn't know how to punish her son because, as she put it, nothing works. Newsflash, Ethel. Because these guys are my generation. Now, Bobby Jr. Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe I make a mistake. It's Bobby. Oh, it's Joe. The eldest. Sorry, I can't keep all the names straight. The eldest. So he's about 10 years older than I. Kerry's a little bit older than I. But everybody here, I mean, I'm a tiny, a few years younger, but this is basically, I'm they 60s, 70s, me 70s, 80s. I mean, our adolescence and our teenage years, and when you're doing all of this stuff that I can't believe it's happening when the moms find out. See, my mom was always, oh my Lord, we were the worst children in the world, or the worst daughters in the world. I mean, she could go on screaming at us for an hour longer. You just sit there going, yeah. I'd just be going, oh my God, if you knew what all of the kids of our generation are out there doing, you would die. Because she was there screaming at us for nothing. Oh, this is a well-known fact amongst the Foxcroft girls. I mean, my younger sister was always vocal about how she hated our mother. I hated her for a long time, but I got over it, and I realized, I mean, anybody who has a mother like that should read Patty Davis's book, The Way I See It, about her mother. And she does a very good, sensitive job of explaining it without trashing her parents and her father. It makes me very sad. Reminds me of my father. although my father was very, very intelligent. um, and also had a different, his very traditional, traditional Southern Confederate family, but not, not an alcoholic family, father at all. I mean, his father was the first white lawyer to successfully defend a black man in the Deep South in 1910, and then went to Washington, worked in intelligence work for the American government, got into subversive stuff. So he retired, but he was also in World War I under MacArthur, and then went to Florida to raise a family. And so, the family story is different. But so, as I say, Reagan, I mean, from what Patty says and what you hear about Reagan, he was a good person, a good man. I mean, I agree with his politics, but he was a good man. And I think that, he was puppet. It was their, really, that was their big tick. Well, because all of them are puppets. All of them. But he was the first real puppet of the Fourth Reich. The Reagan era, the Reaganomics trickled down. That's where the attack really started. There was a bit of that under Nixon, but of course, Watergate, and I think Nixon went down because he was, the start talks. There was going to be a de-escalation in military spending, and I think that's really the reason why he was brought down by the powers that be. Because even as my mother said, oh, he didn't do anything anybody else done do in this city for a long time. So anyway, enough on the politics. I'll get back to the scandalous family of the, because this just cracks me up, because I'm like, excuse me, all of prep school kids were and are like this. If you want my opinion, I think you should ban him from the household altogether, Barbara Gibson suggested. According to her memory of the conversation, just throw him out, Mrs. Kennedy. That's what my mother would do, and that's what I would do if he were my son. Yeah, precisely. Oh, whenever my mother was displeased, you're thrown out of the house. Ever since I can remember, my mother would get in one of her tirades, and this is my house. You do exactly as I say. I'm late. One time, I think I was 13. I got so angry, and it was the first time I grabbed her, her hands, and I said, "You're not hitting me." And and you get out of my house. I left. I mean, I wasn't running away. I went back to this was Orange Grove. It was near the house, junior high school. I went there. There was, guys playing after school soccer. Watched that for a while. One of my friends was playing, so then I went over to his house afterwards. And when it started getting dark, I went home. But I did scare my mom, because she didn't use that one for a very long time afterwards. She was furious. I was gonna call the police, and you would have had her on your record for the rest of your life as a runaway. Even at that young age, I was like, oh, give me a break, lady. If you had, I would have gone, and I said, well, no, she went off on one of her crazy tirades, threw me out of the house. So I left. I didn't run away. I was like, okay, calm down. And then when it started getting dark, I was at the school, and I was at my friend's house, and I came home. I mean, she would look really bad, and that's what scared her. But see, she didn't use that one until I was 19, and there was well, my father made her retract, but I did have to go to work full time after that to make sure I always had enough money in the bank, and paid more and more and more of my own expenses. I mean, there was less and less there, and more screaming at my dad for more and more money. So I was like, no, I mean, I'll pay for what I can. This expensive boarding schools, and then you don't have enough money for higher education. Yeah. These are the wacko women who are controlling. Just throw them out. Just throw them on. You don't like something, if they don't do what I say, out on the street. 15-year-old kid. Ethel looked surprised. Can I do that? She wondered. Is it legal for a mother to do that? Barbara Gibson smiled. You're Ethel Kennedy, she said. You're not going to get arrested for disciplining your child. Yeah, excuse me. Nobody should be above the law. The decision was made then. Ethel said she was going to do as Barbara suggested. Now that she had a solution in place, unconventional though it might have been, Ethel seemed to feel better. That night, she gave Bobby the bad news. He was banished from the home he and the family shared at the compound. But where am I supposed to live? He asked. That's your problem, Ethel told him. If you can't live by my rules, then you can't live in this house. I mean, if he had been 16, he can go out and get a job. But at 15, he's not legally allowed to work. I mean, can you imagine him going into the town and applying for a job and saying he had been thrown out of the house and he needed to work? See, that would have really embarrassed his mom. That night, young Bobby Kennedy pitched a tent on the beach where he would sleep for the next 2 weeks. At night, he would sneak into the homes of relatives in the compound and raid their refrigerators for food. Sergeant Shriver knew what he was up to and always made sure there was some chicken in the refrigerator for his outlawed nephew, recalled Barbara Gibson. I don't know that the punishment did much good, though. I think Bobby just looked at it as an adventure. See, that's another way to get your mom back. I felt badly for Ethel. The kids made her life very difficult when they were young. She was very complex. It took me years to understand her. Oh, lady. Understand her? Well, maybe you can really explain. There are a couple of people, and Andy Williams says the same thing, very complex, and it took me many years to understand her. I'm like, no, not complex at all. She just wants you to make you believe that. But believe me, I know the Machiavellian mind, and the objective is very simplistic. The mind is very simplistic, and then they build all this. Meghan Markle is very adept at that. What's her face? The dumb blonde who got Trump in power. Oh, I can't even believe, oh, she's been out of the picture for a while and I can't recall her name. It's, the PR woman who stepped in and saved the day and got him winning the elections. Oh gosh, what's her name? So a lot of people think that these people are complex. They're not complex. No. But the kids made her life difficult. Oh no. My God. I mean, well, by the time this gets all into court and everything, you know, I'm sure she'll be deceased. But lady, having it all, oh my Lord. There's a reason she goes to church and mass all the time. She got a lot of praying for her soul to do. Because if I was her, I'd be concerned about my soul as well. Ethel hadn't been herself since Bobby was murdered. Those who knew her well found it ironic that she'd just been on the cover of Time a few months before the Chappaquiddick incident in a story about her courage and bravery, in which she was portrayed as the most remarkable member of her remarkable family. New York Senator Jacob Javits described her in the article as the greatest of the Kennedys, male or female. That was a lot to live up to, especially since privately, Ethel didn't feel very courageous or brave. Rather, she was often consumed with confusion and anger about the way things had turned out for her and her family. Oh yeah, this woman had great plans. And with JFK's murder and Bobby's murder, all of that, poof, was gone. You know, the sales had been taken out of Kennedy. Oh, and so she's not going to be in our limelight. She's gonna, you know, basically her, and now she's got stuck with 11 kids that she produced to show what a fine, upstanding family Bobby and Ethel Kennedy were for the American public and you know, her political ambitions. Of course, she was consumed with confusion and anger. She and Bobby had so many plans, so much to do. He had been such a good and decent man who only cared about being of service to others. A deeply religious woman, Ethel couldn't understand why God had taken him from her and her children. Like her mother-in-law and just about all the members of the family, Ethel was a devout Catholic. We had holy water holders in every door of our house, her daughter Kathleen told Newsweek Lisa Miller in 2009. We said prayers before and after every meal. I mean, this is American religious extremism. And in Europe, first, you don't have all of these cults that have grown up. There's just not as many groups, and it's really, you know, divided by the Roman Catholics in the South, and a few different, the Calvinists, I'm not familiar with all of the difference, but you know, the Anglicans, anything that came out of Calvin, anything that came out of the Puritan and the Quaker, but I think it's, you know, it's not all of these different factions, and they're not as extremist religious as this. I mean, you know, like in Spain, you might occasionally find it with one of these wacko, you know, ruling elite ladies, yes, like the Reina Sofia, who has concerns about her soul and the soul of her family. I mean, you talk about your dumb bimbo. See, this is what, ever since Queen Victoria, the strategy has been get dumb, social climbing bimbos into power as the wives, then it was as the wives. It's progressed to anyone and everyone. And for them to remain in power, they'll disempower the smart women and keep them at bay. And, then nobody is minding the store in the social arena. And the business and political world can do whatever they want. I mean, this has been the strategy, and this is what worked with the rise of the Second Reich, the Victoria era, Third Reich, and it's been used in the rise of the Fourth Reich. We went to Roman Catholic schools. On Sundays, we put on our white gloves and shined our shoes. Women wore the mantillas. If we did something good, we got a gold star in heaven. Kerry Kennedy Cuomo said of her mother in 2010, she still goes to mass every day of her life. She prays on her knees before church, prays before every meal, and prays on her knees before going to bed. As I say, when they're that religious, oh, the women particularly, I'm like, ding, 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 ding. Let's scratch the surface. This has got to be some Machiavellian game player. I respect people's religious beliefs, but when their life is so hypocritical and so against, in contradiction to those religious beliefs, and all they spend their time doing is praying, I mean, you don't need to be Einstein. Still, even Ethel's faith couldn't give her strength on what she called the bad days. In the public eye, she knew she had no choice but to act strong. After all, as either the Kennedy patriarch, Joseph, or Bobby once put it, depending on which family member you talk to, Kennedys don't cry. Privately, though, Ethel felt she had a right to her anger. That she had so many children to care for made things that much more difficult for her. This is why I say, ladies, please, if you don't want a lot of children, don't go out and produce them. I mean, when I was little, I used to say I wanted 100 children when I got older. I mean, if there was a baby around, change diapers or give a bottle or play with, I was like, can I have go have? And I mean, my sisters didn't have much of a maternal instinct, so it was always like, yeah, come be here. And I was delighted. Now, when I had 2 children, I did do a little bit of revision. Let's just take at least 1 0 off of that. So, and even that, I was like, oh Lord, with that, you better send me a pretty big pocketbook, because lots and lots and lots of kids cost money. Time and money. Now, I'll put in the time, but I can't supply the money if I'm supposed to supply the time. Where a good provider comes in. Now, 10 pregnancies, that's I mean, I adored being pregnant. But that's like almost 9 years of pregnancy. I don't know, I'm like, oh gosh, I couldn't wear any nice clothes. But I would like, oh, we can adopt. And I mean, I was only blessed with 2 children, and I, had considered adopting when we were in Colombia, but my ex-husband was not. If both are not 200%, that that biological, DNA is unimportant, then it's not a good idea to do, even if one of the people involved really wants to. It's just not this is a person that you are taking into your home and taking as your daughter or your son. And if one is not totally committed to that, the child will know. And it's not a good dynamics. It's not a good dynamics by any means. So anyway, I am so sick and tired of, in the American dream, this idea that our children are the root of our oppression and our boredom and a weight that we have to live through in this world as women. No, oh my God, it's the best thing ever happened to me. As I say, I loved being pregnant. Okay, I mean, some nausea, but I've seen some of these women. I'm like, oh gosh, poor thing. But for me, it was, and I have known women, and like, well, as I say, I respect that if it's not what you want. And then the breastfeeding. Oh God, did I get raked over the goals for breastfeeding my children? I mean, because I did it for a year until they started, because you can't start them on cow milk until a year. And so I did it the first year. My eldest was like, this is lots of work here. Let me just, it was fine. And that's when you listen to your child. We didn't barely made the year, because I said it's better just to wait until you introduce the cow's milk. But in my second, I was like, okay, 1.5. He'd follow me around. Let's just put it this way. I'd be like, no. You have to eat you have to finish your lunch or whatever until you get dessert. That's all he wanted. Oh, I'm sure people say, Mom, how can you say that? So, as I say, I am so tired of this ideology that children are the root of our oppression, or women's oppression, and that women and children and a family are the root of the oppression of the man. This is the agenda of the libertine left and rhetoric of the libertine left. Now, I am not, an alt-right, dumb, Stepford wife woman, and it's not one or the other. I mean, you being a housewife and being a socialite, a trophy wife, someone involved in your communities, does not make you insignificant or a parasite. It is at present, because all of these organizations are bullshit. That's why I wanted to start Global Expats within that's the Expat Wives Club. And I mean, as I say, moving around so much, it would be silly for me to try and go to some small town and say, okay, look, can I get on the PTA, or my niche, if you will, is the expat. Well, that's what I've been doing all my life. And that's where I can make a difference, and that's where I can bring a voice to the table within all government systems and populations that debunk the alt-right left, that, it's no different that, children should not be seen nor heard from the alt-right or the alt-left. And I'm really tired of children being denigrated and families being denigrated by the American ruling elite. And, the nouveau riche and all of the political correct rhetoric. When Bobby was alive, Ethel's home was always filled with politicians and reporters and the most interesting mix of people. He had, my house was filled in the evenings and the weekends. Well, let's just say my ex, he always, had to decide who would be invited and who would not. So believe me, my house would have been filled with many, many more interesting people if it hadn't been for my husband in the evenings. But during the day, one time one woman came pick up her son, and she said, "How many children do you have?" And I said, 2. She said, "Well, why every time do I come around here, there's a whole slew of them running all over the place?" I said, "Because, I prefer they come over to my house. I know a lot of the dynamics that's going on in some of these homes, and particularly with the security concerns we had in Colombia. And so I prefer to be here. And also a lot of these problems, because, some of these were problem kids at school. Oh, they weren't a problem at my house. And see, children do want an adult to set boundaries for them, but in a loving and caring but strict. Oh, no negotiation here. And that's what setting boundaries is about, particularly kids who have no boundaries at home. It brings some sort of actual sense of foundation that there is somebody actually there who's gonna, if they get out of hand, they're gonna be, that's not gonna happen. That's all you have to do. Believe me, I spent so much time with my children, their schoolmates, but also at a school for abandoned girls in Bogota. Oh Lord, the families that some of these girls had come from. It was heartbreaking. But even I gave English classes. I teach them colors and try and give them, things to color to make it a little bit interesting. Most of these girls would be, working by the time they were 14. If the objective was to try and get them into like domestic positions in homes rather than ending up on the streets as prostitutes, because that's what most of them were facing as futures. Occasionally there would be somebody, a girl with some, I one time even told the mother superior, I went to her and I said, the girl has a mind. You need to find another school for her where she can go after she leaves here. And she said, yeah, we're working on it. And that's, that's you know, it was a wonderful, and it's a wonderful project. Of course, they're always short on money. And that type of thing, where I was personally involved, I knew the women who ran it. As I say, I would be down there, not every week giving class, but at least, because a lot of times they'd show up. But I witnessed how money was being spent, the women who ran it. I wouldn't have a problem writing a check. I mean, that's the American Women's Club charities and what they do. And rightfully so, you buy or pay for renovations that they need. But otherwise, oh, don't ever ask me for money for charities. I know too much of what's going on in that industry. And I don't have an exact statistic, but 80% at least has to be going to the people sitting around profiting from it. Let's see. She always knew what she had to do to survive, though. Yeah, a real survivor. The way she coped with sadness, and her kids go to hell. The way she coped with sadness was to ignore it at best she could. It was if she feared that to acknowledge it would have been to risk falling into a deep emotional abyss from which she could never be rescued. Therefore, she never talked about the past, about Jack or Bobby, or about any of her loved ones who had died. Her parents in a plane crash in 1955, her brother in, let's see, there's a typo here. Her brother, another 10 years later. Other than to place the deceased in the context of their heavenly mission, which was to watch over the rest of the family left behind and take care of them from on high. This kind of avoidance frustrated many of her family members, especially her sons, who just wanted to have a reasonable conversation with their mother about their deceased father. For some of them, such as David and Michael, that they could never address their father's murder in some constructive way seemed to create an environment in which the only way they felt able to survive was to escape, either with alcohol or narcotics. I mean, she totally abandoned her children when Bobby died. She was so consumed about her own, plight. Oh gosh, no more parties and no more limelight and because I know too many of these people. I have yet to meet anybody in this town where I can say they're truly capable of love. It's all everybody, and my own family and the families at Foxcroft. I mean, when I went to Foxcroft, I was like, thank you, Lord. Everybody's family is as messed up as mine. Everybody in their world is a pawn. This is the narcissism epidemic is an epidemic. And all of these people view everybody and everything as a pawn, and everything's a game. I was watching this podcast of Sylvester Stallone's daughters with him, doing an interview with him. It was, oh my God, Sylvester Stallone, he had one really difficult life, early life. And see, that's where somebody who went through hell and has used it in a positive way. I wish his daughters would you know, they're pretty much a product of the narcissism epidemic as well. You know, they should take a little bit more time and concern rather than posting podcasts and schmoozing and you know, with their friends to get involved in the communities and prevent the type of childhoods that their father had. And that's how we turn the country around. So, and you know, of course, if the kids, I mean, these kids are going through horrible trauma, and really nobody around to comfort them and talk to them about how they're feeling, you know, what they're thinking. There was also a pervasive feeling that some secret was being kept, that there was information not being revealed to them about the murders of Jack and Bobby. And as Patrick Kennedy, Ted's son, once observed, if your secret, it's your secrets that make you drink, keeping them, wondering about them, fearing them. Within just a short time after Bobby's death in 1968, Ethel Kennedy's oldest son, Joe, Bobby, and David became very hard to control. I guess so. Bobby was the second one that was having sex at 15. Oh, Lord. A boy having sex, a prep school kid having sex with a boy. I mean, with the girls, it was, well, maybe. I mean, has anybody ever seen what's that with Tom Cruise? Oh, it's one of his, I think it was like the first one that launched him. This is back in the 80s, and his parents go out of town, and so he starts business. You know, they have a business project or something in school, so he starts a business. He meets a prostitute, and so all of his friends have trust funds. When the prostitute says, your friends have trust funds, well, I have friends who like trust funds. It's a funny movie, but my point being is, oh, this has been going on for a long time. And also one of the reasons why I didn't want to have children and raise children and a family in the United States, and, you know, left the United States in the 80s. I mean, there was also my mother, and also the you know, I'd given up. I was totally disgusted what was going on Capitol Hill. You know, I got to the financial markets. Sure, I learned a lot, and it was fun trading. But I was like, oh God, you people are even worse. There's got to be something more to life than just, you know, living hand to mouth and you know, snorting cocaine and going out and partying, and the only thing anybody wanted to do. And the Americans have a very dysfunctional attitude towards alcohol. I mean, in Europe, well, it's changing, but you know, this whole thing about not a drop before you're 18. No, I mean, in fact, my youngest, he liked beer. When they were like, here, you can have a sip. Yeah, you can't drink a whole beer when you're 8 years old, or I mean, even when he was 5 and 6, he's like, hey, give him a sip of beer. And no big deal. And when I came back to the States, I saw my ex had been in Barcelona, was living in Barcelona. I still have a lot of questions about what's been going on there all these years. But I'd seen on Facebook, my kids had a party at the house. Because I was like, oh God, yeah, of course, you know, what are they, 16, 17, 18 by this time? I'm like, what do you do when parents are on? You have a party. And I sent a message, or maybe spoke with Mike and spoken with him for several years. They don't pick up. I said, oh yeah, I had a party. And he said, oh yeah, Mom, but we're not doing it again. You have to clean up afterwards. And I laughed. And I said, yeah. See, all the parties and everything that went on, wasn't ding, 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 twinkle, 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 like Bewitched. So that got old real fast, but it was also because it was no big deal. It wasn't like they were doing something behind, I would be like, well, yeah, of course. And if anybody has had too much to drink, they sleep there and you don't let them drive home. That would be the only thing I have to say. Because also it wouldn't be those drunken bashes where everybody is vomiting all over the place, because the European kids, that's just not, they grew up around wine at the table. I mean, a lot of them, they'll put, when they're young, a bit of wine in their water, particularly on Sundays at the dinner table. It's that when you make it a big deal and you make it prohibited, that's when the adolescents and the teenagers, I want to do it. I'm not allowed to do it. I want to do it. At least the ones with a little spine and character. So they were very hard to control, especially during their annual summers in Hyannis Point. Also, these kids went to boarding school. They all Choate. I had visited Choate because Foxcroft, I didn't like. It was too much of a cliques, and also I didn't like single-sex schools. I always preferred the company of men. But Choate, well, they wanted me to repeat a year. I said, no, well, I'm getting out of this house as fast as I can. And also it was very, very factory. It was very, Foxcroft was 200 girls. It was, and I have to say, I was very, I think I had excellent teachers. It gave me a very good education. So and it's not Choate is up there with Hotchkiss and Exeter and those. So Foxcroft's not in the same category, but I'm still to this day happy that I stayed at Foxcroft. So it was easier to understand that the older children were traumatized by the death of their father. And the youngest would always feel a sense of longing for the dad they barely remembered. There was a lot of sadness, recalled one of Ethel's employees at that time, but it was mixed with natural teenage rebellion and also a sense of entitlement. From an early age, the kids were raised to believe that they were special. They got a lot of press coverage and attention, and it went to their heads. And of course, there were so many of them, Ethel was at a loss. She called it my cross to bear. She relied on the senator, Ted, a lot, and he did his best, but it was hard. He too was grieving. So, nobody in this family knows, how to step in and kind of take charge when somebody needs to take charge. And these are the people who are leading the world. The human rights, part of the problem with the human rights industry is Ethel Kennedy starting her, that was called something else first, the Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights Organization. And all they do is, it's the human rights NGOs are no different than the domestic violence NGOs. And they're in bed with the feminists. and the minoritists. And their go-to response is always, human rights violations only happen in Darfur and Sudan with me. You know, that's how they play the ignore me till I go away game with me. So, gosh. So, you know, all of these, the first, you know, Amnesty International was the first I contacted. That's 2007. And since then, I've just been racking up names and names and names of all of the human rights NGOs that I want to see in the international courts. And the ones in the United States under RICO, Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, and the Patriot Act. That's where I've been building, you know, the cases against everybody. And they're on the bandwagon. Women's rights organizations, domestic violence organizations, and human rights organizations. It's all bullshit. They have a couple little people who then get out on a podium and on the internet and say how wonderful they are because how they had helped them. They find, you know, Trump did this all the time as well. Everybody does it. You can't say it was just Trump. That's what everybody does. This is why the smaller NGOs get called out. I mean, who nobody was going to challenge Ethel Kennedy all these years, except if the alt-right, it hadn't been in their interest that the alt-left keep on becoming more and more extreme with these wacko control freak women and getting into power. And now their daughters. And now their granddaughters. Because we see the Cuomo girls, Mariah, Michaela, and Cara. They're all going down the same road as their mother and their grandmother. And because one of them is promoting the SDGs. Everybody who's promoting the SDGs, I'm going to see in court. It's all propaganda and faulty propaganda. The SDGs will produce income inequality and the rise of dictatorships in countries around the world, just as the trickle-down Reaganomics has in the past 40 years in the United States, because the purse strings and the discussion is held by the narcissists, the psychopaths, on the libertine left and the Fourth Reicher right. And basically, because this is, fascists are usually considered only the alt left, excuse me, the alt right, you know, nationalist, dictatorial. But as I show, the alt left is as much fascist as the alt right. The only difference is the alt left, the fascist regime that, you know, the dictatorial regime that will have authority and power over all of the others to oppress them, are the browns, the blacks, the yellows, and the feminists. Right? It's white supremacists. But everybody on both sides are fascists, because it is an extremism, dictatorial, nationalistic regimes that they're looking for. So Bobby and Ethel's oldest son, and also the oldest of the third generation of Kennedys, was Joseph Kennedy II, Joe. From the beginning, there seemed to be a lot of pressure on him. For instance, just 2 days after JFK's assassination on November 24th, 1963, his father wrote him a letter that suggests extremely high expectations of an 11-year-old. "You are the oldest and the male grandchild," Bobby wrote. "You have a special and particular responsibility now, which I know you will fulfill. Remember all the things that Jack started. Be kind to others that are less fortunate than me, and love our country." Of course, Bobby's death hit Joe, now 16, very hard. He not only loved his father, but also admired him greatly, and therefore the despair he felt at losing him so suddenly was almost overwhelming. It had actually been his gut-wrenching duty to inform his siblings of their father's death. I mean, when I read that, my heart went out to the poor man. I just, I mean, that Ethel just abandoned her children. As it happened, Joe had been at boarding school when his dad was shot and was flown across the country to be at his deathbed with some of his siblings who were already on that coast. When Bobby finally died, Ethel shut down completely and was unable to tell her children about it. So it was left to Joe, who was just 15 at the time, to try to make sense of it all with his siblings. Because Bobby had been such a hero to him, Joe felt on a very deep level that there was no way he would ever be able to measure up to his father's standards of greatness, no matter how hard he tried. The fact that he sat at his father's chair at the dinner table after Bobby was gone likely didn't help matters either. Just, the movie 10 Ways to Lose a Guy, 100 Ways to Screw Up Your Kids. And this was another thing when Bobby had been banished to the beach, a tent on the beach. Here they're trying to give me a tent on the street. I prefer a tent on the beach in Hyannis Point, where somebody's leaving me some chicken in the refrigerator, than the street in Washington and the food lines, which is what everybody's been trying to do for the past 15 years with me, for the same reason: power and control. You obey me, or you'll see, you'll be out, destitute. Just commit sati and do the world a favor. See, it's the same game. But now, if this had been my nephew, are you kidding? I would have been over to my sister's house. Like, you can't believe. And I would be like, excuse me, your son is not going to be sleeping on the tent out there. If there's a problem here, he can come and stay with us. And if the problem is so great that, he can't stay, well, he can stay permanently. And any of your other kids, you're fucking up. Because believe me, I know. I knew all of the kids at the school, with problem kids. I always told my friend Pia, who's a child psychiatrist who works with kids with storytelling. I said, Pia, but I've never met a problem child. I've only met children with problem parents. And until you get to them to tell them to stop screwing up your kids, it's not going to stop. I mean, a lot of what I want to do with global expats is change this I own you attitude of parents. And it is just worse in the United States. When I was young with my parents, I mean, my mother, but my girlfriends, most of my girlfriends, even in Tucson, not come from very functional families, even though it's the 10%ers, the 1%ers of the country. But the cool moms were okay. Now the cool moms are wacko. They're just left-wing wacko, whereas the alt-right wacko is the Joan Crawford, Nancy Reagan stuff. But as you say, the left control freak wacko Ethel is no different than Nancy Reagan and how she screws up kids. Barbara Gilson, who knew Joe very well when he was a boy, recalled, I think he felt as if he wasn't smart enough, wasn't good looking enough, wasn't Kennedy enough, is how he would put it to me, to take his father's place in the family. I mean, this guy grows up with an inferiority complex because he's supposed to, live up to the image of his father. Cause there's some pretty propelling evidence that as I say, Bobby didn't give the lethal injection to Marilyn Monroe, but he was involved. He apparently was even there that night. And what happened to Marilyn in the beach house before being moved to the house, and who was involved in that, and what made her almost die there. She was almost killed there. They were resuscitating her, and that's when her psychiatrist came in and killed her with an injection. So, as I say, it's the image. He was a muscular guy who started to use brawn to get his way. In the other words, he became a bit of a bully. It was a defensive mechanism, which is normal. We all knew it. It also didn't help that there was a sense of Joe as not being very smart. It's a shame, Rose Kennedy told Gibson during one of their daily walks on the beach, that Joe isn't very smart, especially with him being the oldest boy. In fact, while Joe was having a very difficult time in school, it was because of dyslexia, not dumb. Or at least that's how he sees it today. And yeah, and dyslexia. I've had dyslexia, and I never suffered from dyslexia when I was young. I suffered from migraine headaches that disappeared when I went to boarding school, and it was, from the stress from my mother. But since I've been back, and this was particularly, after the trauma, 1 year, afraid freaking for my life in Spain, getting out alive. I'd been through long-term, very high stress trauma for several years before, and then to be bullied and denigrated and discriminated against, and having constantly looking for a new job because the person who got rid of me was jealous because I was more competent than them, or same problem with the housing. Just everywhere I go, I'm bullied, I'm denigrated, I'm spit upon. And why? Because I've been canceled by my family and friends, as well as the legal community, because I'm like, well, I wouldn't care about my family and friends. I know how to defend myself. Not like Ethel, you throw anything at me, and as bad as it gets, uh, I'll figure it out, know how to handle it, figure it out, and not only say move myself forward, but move everybody else around me forward. And that's been my role in life, whether it was with my family growing up or my ex-husband. And when you have to do that repeatedly and repeatedly and repeatedly, and the problems, the chaos that everybody produces around you just get bigger and bigger and bigger, you become more and more of an expert at it. And yes, I'm an old lady whose womb no longer works, therefore no longer of interest to the man looking for fresh meat. However, that just shows, where the priorities are in Washington, and it's not any indication of me being stupid. However, dyslexia, even if I had wanted to get back into the financial markets, and trading and all of that, which no, I wouldn't be able to do it, because and the dyslexia, it'll come back. It'll be high, when the stress level is elevated from the people at work or the housing that I'm living in, and all of the bullies, and go on to Kilborn House, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest playlists, which I'm getting the evidence for the court about what's going on in this house, but it's typical. Same bullshit in every house I've been in one way or another. So this dyslexia, it is as is Asperger's, autism, and all of that. These are products of a faulty environment for young children. Stressful, chaotic. As I say, you can't say, oh, well, it's for one reason, because you got a lot of variables. That's why it's important for schools to be, attentive of this stuff, and instead of hiring another freaking psychologist, that's wacko, and the kids know it. There needs to be, and this is where again the ruling elite women in the town, the city, of course, in a small town, they're not going to have the same power at a national level or a state level, but they have responsibility for their community. You get into the capitals, well, the ruling elite women there have more of a responsibility of what's going on in the community, and this is what trickles down. And they, get involved with the PTAs, as I say, my niche is the expat wives clubs, but it's the same, getting these women, the stay-at-home wives, the moms, the trophy wives, the ruling elite, with the expat wives. This gets into the ambassadors, the consulates, the different people within, for example, in Washington, the different people in the different federal government agencies, the congressional wives, the IMF Family Association, the World Bank Family Network. See, instead of getting rid of me because I did a good job in putting order into the IMF Family Association in the 2 years that I was there, because it was no files, no organizational system. Like everywhere I've gone, I'm like, the administrative function is a joke, and a really sick joke. Nobody keeps files anymore. Everything's a mess. The same at the IMF and what HR department. It's too busy with meetings and coming up with these great campaigns like the Sustainable Development Goals, where they can produce another industry and a whole bunch of propaganda jobs for college grads. And, and then they look down at all of the wives. Why? Because the wives are a bunch of dumb bimbos in this town. I'm like, you guys, guess what? The reason, maybe in the next life, you will realize that, you might want to not marry and hire and sleep with only dumb bimbos during your life, because they get involved in a lot of shit, and you can get caught in the little snares. So yes, they'll turn a blind eye to your zipper problems. They'll turn a blind eye to your amoral business and political dealings and corruption and everything else that you're doing, that you don't want anybody raining on your little parade with some sort of moral integrity. So yeah, they'll turn a blind eye to all of that. However, when you get caught in the snare, particularly if they're involved in illegal activity, because you're doing it, so why not them? And they get caught, you're going to go down with them. So marrying somebody with a brain and integrity is a lot more valuable than a pocketbook. Or a sleazy whore who, doesn't care anything about anything in the world except going shopping. Let's see. So just so sad. He was never tested for dyslexia. Okay, yeah. However, he was sure he had it then and believes he still does today, and that he would have benefited greatly by some sort of treatment for it. I found the best treatment is getting the stress out of my life. And then it as I said, the stress has been so prolonged for past 20 years. Of course, it's affected me. And yeah, trading with numbers and blah, 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 because it's really mainly with numbers. I do have it occasionally in reading, but it was the numbers particularly. And usually, I'm like that with numbers. And a telephone number, I couldn't even remember the entire telephone. Thank God I would have it on the screen. It was a number form of dyslexia, but because I've also noticed it with reading and writing, whereas I never had that as a child. So meanwhile, when Joe asked his mother if he could go back to Spain in the summer of 1968 with a friend named Chuck McDermott, she decided to let him go. She talked it over with Ted, and they decided it would do Joe some good, said one of Ethel's relatives. But to be honest, I always felt that it did Ethel more good to not have to worry about the kids that summer. I think that's how Ted saw it too. Yeah, and I'm sure her kids as well. I remember, oh my Lord, when we were at Foxcroft, if anybody would, I wouldn't beg people to invite me. And I had one friend who always invited me for Thanksgiving and all the time in Pennsylvania. I was like so thankful. Anything not to have to go home and spend vacations around my mother. Now, of course, this had a detrimental effect on a relationship with our father. I mean, she alienated him from us when we were young, and then they disappeared. So, I've spent my life basically alienated from the three really only people who matter to me: my father and my children. And of course, that's why everybody alienates them from me, because they know that's how they can destroy me. That's, you go for where it hurts. And the vulnerable part of your enemy. And it is what it is. Indeed, that same summer, 1968, Ethel sent another of her sons, David de Meyerhofen, Austria, to attend a ski and tennis camp with his cousin, Chris Lawford, Pat's son. That's Peter Lawford's son also. He was part of the Rat Pack of Hollywood. The whole George Clooney and everything, they're the new Rat Pack of Hollywood. As it happened, David lost his virginity on that trip to a 17-year-old girl in Austria, who, while they were being intimate, told him how sorry she was that his father had been murdered. It seemed to make no sense to outsiders. However, Ethel's daughter, Kathleen, was 17 in 1968, and she was sent off to teach at an Indian reservation. In fact, the family customarily sent their offspring to other countries, either for vacation so they could see the world, or for work so they could be of service to others. See, this is same as the British royals, at least with now William and Catherine Middleton, there is that trajectory is changing. But again, Prince Charles was in an arranged marriage. Prince Andrew was in an arranged marriage. Where's the liberty for them? And quite frankly, I mean, Charles, let's go out. And that was Lord Mountbatten. He was a pedophile. Let's bring in a young, dumb, blonde bimbo, looks pretty on a podium, little princess with, narcissistic, spoiled, entitled princess who's not a threat to anybody. That's what Victoria was, and Elizabeth II has been as well. Just a little, a puppet queen that won't make any waves and who will do her charity work. We've seen this since the 60s and 70s. You don't want charity work. You don't want charity-based, societies, so they can, not feel guilty about how they're exploiting their people. And then they screw you over and then throw you a couple pennies to make them feel better and buy their way to heaven. cleanse their soul. Yeah, but God has never bought that one. That I don't need verification from the top. I'm sure he's seen through that one throughout history. And that is what is being continued today. But as the development community said in the 60s and 70s, not the way to go. Socioeconomic development, teach them how to fish instead of giving them a fish. But the World Bank, IMF, UN, International Development Community, they're all just in it for the money, the power, the glory for themselves. And then, they're playing the same game as the royal family and this Kennedy family. And they're following this lead. I mean, you see it with the Cuomo girls. Yeah, they were jet set here. They went to one of them. She was in Colombia, Haiti. I forget where else. I think someplace in Africa. I'm like, yeah, Colombia. I lived there for 6 years. Haiti, I went to visit my sister there for 2 weeks in 80. This was at the end of 87, before I left for France to be a jeune fille au pair, and that's to learn French, and then that's where I met my ex-husband. But say, a year and a half out of college, I was earning 3 times in the financial markets as what I had when I had started. Now, my ex-husband, during that time period, had gotten fired from his first job. Now, he ended up as director of Treasury Department in Banco Ganadero, Colombia. Yet, I'm unemployable. I'm a parasite on society who should just go out there and kill myself because I'm not even capable of a minimum, handling a minimum wage job. No, I'm not going to just go out and commit sati and suicide and make everybody happy. No, I'm going to rain on your little parade. Now, the thing is, this whole suicide stuff and sati games with me is, I'm trying to remember which international convention that is. Might even be in the Rome statutes. But I already have everybody on Article 6 and 7 now. Well, 7 and 6, because it's crimes against humanity, genocide. But this is just on log on the fire. So as I say, everybody should just give it up, because I'm not committing suicide. If you find my body, it wasn't suicide. I can assure you that. That was tried in Spain, believe me. Wow. As you can see, I didn't commit suicide, and they weren't successful in their attempts to kill me. So it doesn't seem that today Ethel's offspring have a very critical view of what Ethel was trying to achieve by exposing her children to the world around them at such an early age. One of the most important things our mother did was teach us the lesson, you are what you do, says Christopher Kennedy. She surrounded us with people who had done great things. Now, they'd gotten lots of awards and traveled around the world and had lots of money. How great the things were in reality, maybe great for the rise of the Fourth Reich. Yeah, but when we went hiking, it was the guns with guys like Jim Whittaker, the first American to reach the summit of Everest. When we played sports, it was with Rosie Greer and Rafer Johnson. What they had in common was a great sense of success and of service. And that was the example by which we were raised. We traveled a lot. We were always traveling, actually. People thought she was trying to get rid of us. That makes me laugh, really, because I'm sure it was true. It's evident. As I say, my own family doesn't have or didn't have the money or prestige of the Kennedy family, but it doesn't matter. And Ethel Kennedy was from her father was rags to riches. So she had grown up an entitled, narcissistic, spoiled girl of a rags to riches father who had made his wealth. But once again, the dangers of class mobility. You see it all over the Kennedy family. And where that family is today, they've grappled up into positions of power, but either they're doing great damage, like with Kerry Kennedy and the Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights Org, or cashing in on the Kennedy name. And this always leads to the downfall of the family. In fact, the Kennedy curse and everything like that. Well, of course, they got in the Machiavellian game where everybody plays hardball, real hardball. It's not a democrat. We don't have a democracy, and the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights have not been implemented since the very beginning. It is real hardball. And see, with assassinations, these guys play for keeps. You want to get in the game, but you can't even handle any little problems that life brings you. Okay, your husband being assassinated is not a little problem. I mean, I had one of my friends' husband, golden boy, in France. She said, God, he crashed and burned them. See, not all of them are success stories. That's what nobody wants out from, this is Foxcroft or the politically correct propaganda. You just keep on, you get straight A's, you get into these schools, and you grapple up the ladder of success, and your happiness and wealth is guaranteed. It's not true. And those who can't cut it do crash and burn. And there are a lot of casualties, not only with those who work in the banking system and the financial markets, but the consumers. So, these little ladies who want to sit around and get awards and jet set around the world and visit poor countries to come home and say how much good they're doing in the world is really getting old. Really getting old. This lady's been doing it since 68. Still, it seems that sometimes the Trip Ethel plan backfired. Okay, I'm gonna wait. There was something. Okay, so these are travels. Oh, this is what I wanted to read a bit from. So you know, it just goes into. Then came the episode of having sex in the compound and his subsequent. Oh, okay, yeah. When Bobby Jr. returned from his trip, he ended up being suspended from Millbrook School, the Dutchess County prep school he had attended for 2 years. Okay, well, also, I'd like to point out that when I did my my blogs for Sean Penn in 2016, defending his El Chapo Speaks article and the bullying and denigration and bashing he got from everybody, and silenced him. It was to silence him because a ruling elite do not want the war on drugs to end. Too much money being made. So anyway, I got into William Penn. William Penn, who got it was a British, what do they call it, title or something, land grant, but this was from the British Crown for Pennsylvania. I think they kind of got tired because he was from a good family, and I think they kind of got tired of having to put him in the Tower of London in jail, and thought maybe we'll just send him to the colonies with land grant and get him out of our hair. Because he got kicked out. Okay, was it? Okay, I'm mixing it up. It was 7 times, either from boarding school or went to Tower of London 7 times, or vice versa, or something like that. But he got kicked out of a lot of boarding schools and he got sent to the Tower of London a lot of times. And that's what I think they kind of said, okay, let's send him off to the colonies. We don't want to disembowel him over the Thames River like we do with our poor people. So we'll just ship him off. So, you know, some of the great men who have done great things, and women in this world, were not docile students and did get sometimes kicked out of their schools. And you know, for something other than drug, you know, consumption, I can assure you, William Penn, it wouldn't have been for smoking pot. So the Hyannisport Terrors, the HPTs, the Hyannisport Terrors, was the name Joe, 17, Bobby Jr., 15, and David, 14, came up with for the little gang they had formed, along with several other youngsters in the Cape Cod neighborhood. I think I even heard about one of these stories back in the 80s because it rings a bell. So the 3 boys would sneak out of Ethel's home in the middle of the night, race down to the Shriver's home nearby, and meet with Eunice and Sergeant's boy, Bobby, and Pat's son, Christopher, who was often visiting. They'd then don dark clothing and smear black grease on their faces to hide their identities and take off for a night of misbehavior, often high on marijuana, and on occasions even LSD. Okay, the LSD, I'm like, kids, no. Kids who are smoking pot, I'm like, look, just don't go overboard, and you know, not before you go to class. And what's going on that you need to smoke some pot there? We have a talk. So usually they'd meet 3 or 4 other kids in Hyannis and spend the nights causing all sorts of trouble, recalled Thomas Langford, who knew the Kennedy boys at the time. He was 17, and as he put it, a charter member of the HPTs. Sometimes I played along when I had the nerve, We'd shoot off firecrackers, deflate people's tires, stick potatoes in the exhaust pipes of cars, turn over trash cans, mess around with girls, all sorts of mischief. Yeah. And what I want to read this also. I mean, right. It reminds me a lot of the, so, you know, like any of the antics that I got involved in, it didn't, you know, destroy property or hurt anybody or anything like that. But, and that's the age there. And particularly, what's going on here is actually a very, very normal reaction of these boys. First, 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old boys. Yeah, by definition, they're going to be going out and carousing, you know, male testosterone, you know, all sorts of hormonal stuff going on with kids at that age. So that's kind of, yeah, they become, you know, disruptive. But this kind of behavior is obviously, you know, trying to get attention, because the parents, what I can read is Sergeant Shriver was the only person around seemed to have you know, any kind of head on his shoulder. And I think, you know, when Ethel would get hysterical because there would be an emergency crisis with her boys, apparently Ted and Sergeant Shriver would always be called in to you know, talk to the boys and deal with the situation. And I think you know, Ted, of course, is just, you know, another one of the Kennedys, and he's the youngest of the Kennedy boys from Joe and Rose. So I think it was more Sergeant Shriver who is the only kind of stabling force that these kids had. But you know, it just dysfunctionality all over the frickin' place. After we did our bit, Ethel would get calls from everyone in town complaining about it. At first, she used to say, "My kids were home asleep last night. I don't know what you're talking about." Deny, always. But one night, she waited up. And sure enough, she caught me, Bobby, and David jumping out one of the second floor windows at her home. She chased us all over the compound in the middle of the night in her nightgown and bare feet, finally losing us somewhere on the stretch of beach. See, these boys were not afraid of Ethel at all. Now, if my mom had caught us, I would not have run away. The fallout would have been so much worse. The next morning, the brothers, but see, this is also why I was glad to be away at boarding school. Because, I mean, when we go home in the summers, or anytime on vacation to Louisiana, to their farm between Hammond and Covington, I mean, we were put to work 24/7. We weren't even allowed, like, I mean, no, not even pay for a movie, but well, can we go around and just like walk around the mall and window shop, but just get off the farm, do something? No. So, see, this is the problem with having super strict parents. When the kids get out, they go wild. Oh gosh, I went wild my first semester, particularly. year of college, but also courses were so boring. Bullshit. I mean, yeah, like, I mean, really, it's criminal, the higher education industry that's going on, and leaving the debt, unpaid student loan debt, just so all of the PhDs and MBAs and all of the college grads that they keep on churning out, there's not enough jobs for them all, can go into academia and you can produce jobs. But guess what? All of these academics in there, they're part of the cacophony. And they need to be held account under RICO, Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, and Patriot Act as well, because they're part of the rise of the Fourth Reich and responsible. It's you know, it's all connected. All of these groups. I have a tiny little laptop, so I couldn't get it into a PowerPoint slide. So it was just too small to put on. It would drive me batty, so I did it on, you know, a drawing. But they're all here. Bretton Woods, which is IMF, World Bank, UN, the Alpha-Dominance Feminists, my case in Spain, the universities, academia, International Development Committee, community, NGOs, capital venturists, because that I saw when I was looking for capital venture money and partners, past 15 years for global expats. I mean, I had my idea back in 2005, 2006, which is about the time Bezos started. And one of the things that I show is, yeah, look at Bezos' case, who have all these pop-ups, who, yeah, when he came up with the idea for Amazon, was like, oh, you know, 90% chance of failure, but he still had people in his family invest with him. And he did, you know, slap together a business plan on a cross-country plane ride. And, you know, I'm like, well, wait a second, I've got a business plan that, you know, people say it's the best they've seen. Before I came up with how I was going to be making money, I had done like a year of research into all of the different other you know, platforms, the information, the local search directory type platforms, but that were directed towards expats, because there has been a niche market there that just nobody's made any money. That you had one that was doing franchising. I was like, that's not going to work. Normally the formula was they'd set it up as a exclusive membership group, and to access the information you'd have to, you know, pay to get into the website. And I said from the beginning, I mean, Susan Feeney, big wig international marketing over at Bank of America in Spain, said, you know, well, nobody's going to want that information. I said, excuse me? I mean, the expat wives clubs, we've been doing a book since the 1960s because women are begging for this information. Of course they'll but, and she said, oh no, you have to make it an exclusive membership. And I was like, oh yeah, okay, great. This is the international marketing guru for Bank of America, and the girl doesn't have any idea what marketing is about. I was like, yeah, okay, fine. I mean, she wasn't interested in the project, and I'm like, okay, fine, because you know, just another one out there of the corporate world showing you the level of incompetence that is out there amongst the professionals who don't even understand the basic fundamentals of their area of expertise. And, you know, oh, you got to do this. It's not going to make money. You offer this free of charge. I'll get millions of people coming in for that information just within the expat communities. But you also have lots of people who travel abroad, between countries or between cities for business or pleasure. So that's a whole other, user market, if you will. I was like, no, this thing is a freaking gold mine. Facebook has shown that I was right. LinkedIn's shown that I was right. I mean, Amazon is brick and mortar type of thing, but I'm like, if I would have said to Bezos right away, I said, of course it'll work. What you're doing is the catalogs, the Sears catalogs, the home catalogs. Sears did it. You've got the Redoute in France, but there's a whole industry. Sears was the original one in the 1800s in the United States, when you had all of these people out in the frontiers and ordering the stuff that way, because you didn't have all of these stores across the nation. And of course, when those stores started, that's when the Sears and those catalog companies really went down. And then it was, turned into an internet distribution system. So of course it would work. Of course. I mean, I was like, you have an entire industry that was created over 100 years ago that was a huge success on that business model, and you're not sure it's going to work. See, and you see Zuckerberg, college dropout. Bill Gates, college dropout as well. Yeah, these guys are techie gurus. They know how to, they knew how to program, do lots of fancy computer programs, but that's it. And obviously they have a very, very, very low morality of everything that they've gotten in. This is, again, with the United States, perfect case study of the past 250 years, if not more, of the dangers of social mobility within a social order. The solution is not preventing social mobility. It is promoting social mobility in, accordance with merit and nothing else. Not because you're white, or now because you're black and brown and yellow and you want to pay back the whites. It'll just create the situation that it's creating now. You're pissing off the whites, and so they want their power back, and they are getting more and more extremist as the browns, yellows, and blacks are. It just, let's pull it apart. It's like a screaming match. I'll escalate. No, I'm going to escalate. Then I'll escalate. Then I'll escalate. Okay. Let's see. After we did our bit. Oh yeah. Okay. But one night. Oh yeah. Okay. Wait. Okay. The next morning, the brothers told me they snuck back in the house while she was still asleep. But then she got up before they did and locked them both in their bedroom. When she finally let them out, 17, 15, 14. When she finally let them out at about 8 that night, they took off with one of the sheets. See how you don't sit down with your kids and go, okay, what's going on? It's got to stop. I mean, obviously, there's not a relationship where that would happen. I mean, you know, my children never of this or any age. I mean, they would do little mischievous stuff. This is the type of stuff that kids are getting into that's normal about, you know, like 7, 8, 9, 10. They'll get into, how shall I say it, kind of delinquent type behavior, mainly the boys, and mischief, but the girls as well. And it's as they say, as long as it's not really extreme stuff where they're destroying property and they're hurting other people, it's really never, you don't want to just let it go and ignore it. You say that is not appropriate, that is not what you should be doing. Now, why did you do that? And have a discussion about why are you acting out like this? And usually they won't really understand themselves. A lot of changes are going on, but I don't want to get into that because that is. But what I'm saying is that age, that's normal. Now, this age, this type of relationship between a mother and her sons, I mean, you're like, well, by that age, I walk into a family situation like that, and I'm like, okay, it's really too late to do anything about your mother. Can we sit down, boys, and maybe we can do something to straighten you guys out? Because I think your mom's a lost cause. So apparently during their time alone all day, they'd made a makeshift flag out of it, which had emblazoned on it the words HPT's rule. See, they didn't have idle hands. They got busy. They wanted to be active. Just put them towards some more productive type of activity. That night, they rigged it so that they could get it up on the steeple of a local church, St. Andrew's Presbyterian. I happened to be at Ethel's sitting in the living room. I happened to be at Ethel's. You should have called me here. Sitting in the living room the next day, watching TV with Bobby Schreiber when the doorbell rang. According to Thomas Langford, Ethel went to the door to find a man standing there with a bed sheet in his hand. He turned out to be the minister of the St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church. Mrs. Kennedy, I think this belongs to you, he said. Ethel looked perplexed. But what is it, Reverend? He said, it's a sheet that I think your boys hung from the steeple of St. Andrew's Presbyterian. Ethel protested. My boys are Catholic, she said. They would never do such a thing. The Reverend then turned over a corner of the sheet and showed it to her. On it were the initials RFK, obviously for Robert Francis Kennedy. For a moment, Ethel had no words. The next time your boys want to fly a flag, ask them to do so from the steeple of the Catholic Church, not from mine. that, he handed Ethel the sheet and took his leave. Ethel closed the door. Then at the top of her lungs, she looked to the heavens and screamed, "Give me strength." I'm sorry, but I'm enjoying her pain. And this reverend handled the situation appropriately. You know, these days, what it called the cops. The kid's arrested and, you know, start a whole. And I love, tell them the next time they want to do it, put them in my Catholic church. It was all just mischief, but troubling just the same when the stories would get back to Ethel or the other adults in the family. Oh, what adults? For instance, one prank had the boys playing a busy Hyannis Port tourist plane in busy Hyannis Port tourist traffic, only to have one kid fall to the ground while another smacked the back of the car, making a loud noise. This is the one I think I heard about back in the 80s. And then they would all gather around their fallen chum and shout hysterical sentiments at the driver, such as, "You just killed another Kennedy." When panicked people came to the aid of the young Kennedy, sprawled in the middle of the road, the boys would milk it for all it was worth by trying to get the boy to move his legs and then saying it looked as if he'd been paralyzed. But then the fallen Kennedy would suddenly stand up and walk away. At that, the other boys would proclaim, "Look, it's a Kennedy miracle," and then race off, leaving a crowd of very upset Hyannis Port tourists in their wake. Now, I had to do it to the tourists because I think the locals got wise to the thing pretty quick. Probably if they tried it with them, would pick it up. Get out of here. But unsuspecting tourists, of course, didn't know about the Kennedy, the Hyannis Port terrors that were on the loose. But you know, even when I was young and I heard this story, I was like, oh my God, but you guys, the people who thought that they had hurt you, you know, had at least a few minutes there of like really being, you know, like, oh my God, not, you know, like, have I paralyzed somebody for life? Oh my God, you know. So there, as I say, as long as it is not property damage and doesn't hurt anybody, it's you know, boyhood antics. And this is, you know, actually a very, very normal kind of way for them to be, how shall I take, coming to terms with, because I'm sure they didn't, because they were never allowed to talk about it and express it and talk about what they were feeling. And I mean, the psychiatrist who did Bush on the Couch, I forget what his name is right now, but he mentions this. It's a very good book. He mentions this, that this is son Bush. At 5 years old, his younger sister, 2-year-old younger sister, died, and he had been very close to her, and it was never explained to him. It was never talked about. She just disappeared. And of course, the psychiatrist was like, that left a traumatic imprint on that man for the rest of his life. So it is really, really important that deaths in the family, particularly a parent, be properly discussed with the children. I mean, when I was reading this, I was like, God, these poor guys. But they just made me laugh because it reminded me of some of the stuff that went on when I was that age. The stories are legendary in Cape Cod even today. Yes. One could write an entire book on the mayhem the HPTs caused in Hyannis in the late 1960s and 1970s. One could fill a tomb with the many times Ted Kennedy sat down with his nephews to try and reason with them. We're probably talking on a weekly basis, is how Thomas Langford put it. Ethel would call in tears, and Ted would come running, saying, "Don't worry, Effie, I'll take care of it." That was just their dynamic. He put the boys in a room and give them a good talking to, telling them that their father wouldn't approve, that sort of thing. It didn't much matter, though. After each time, he and Ethel would reconvene, and she would say, "Well, what do you think?" And he would say, "I did my best. Let's see if it sticks." Unbeknownst to most people at the Kennedy compound during the summer week in 1969, when everyone was dealing with Ted's accident at Chappaquiddick, Ethel was handling another matter with one of her sons, minor embarrassment to what was going on with Ted, but upsetting just the same. On the same night as Ted's accident, Joe got into some trouble just a few miles away. At the time, Joe was 17 and enrolled in the private Milton Academy, living there and not at home. On the day of Ted's accident, Joe arrived at Martha's Vineyard to watch the Edgerton Regatta and cheer his Uncle Ted, who was sailing in the race. So they go to the regatta. So they go to Daggett House. Once checked in, they unpacked their bags and went off to the races. They returned several hours later, but now with 5 friends, all of whom had been invited to stay in the room. After the owner of the establishment, Frederick Chergwin, learned of this new arrangement, he told Kennedy he would not permit it. The 5 friends would have to find other accommodations. In response, Joe took off his sailing hat and furiously flung it at the Chergwin. "You can't do this to me," he shouted at him. "I'm a Kennedy. If a Kennedy rents a room, he can do what he likes with it." That outburst resulted in Joe being kicked out of the hotel altogether. He went back to the Kennedy compound in the small apartment Ethel had given him above one of the garages. By the time he got there, though, Chergwin had already called Ethel. Naturally, she was upset. Enraged by the hotel owner's call, Ethel burst in on Joe and was horrified to find that he had a teenage girl in his apartment with him. "You," Ethel said angrily, pointing at the startled young lady, "you get out of here right now, or so help me God, I'll..." Appearing frightened out of her wits, Joe's paramour gathered her delicates and made a dash for it. Then Ethel let her son have it. Her shrill voice could be heard all over the compound. "You think you can do anything you want just because you're a Kennedy?" she demanded to know. "Do you think your grandfather would be proud of your behavior?" She then told her son to go to his room and write a 5,000-word essay about why I think Grandpa would be very disappointed in me. I want to read it in the morning. Afterwards, Rose came over to Ethel's to see what all the fuss was about, as Ethel relayed parts of the story, carefully leaving out the details involving Joe and the girl in the apartment. Oh, Lord, God forbid that should get out. She sat on the sofa with her legs crossed at the knees, her arms and hands animated as she went on about her frustration with her children and their behavior. Rose took it all in patiently. Finally, she said, "May I offer you some advice?" Ethel said she would most certainly welcome any advice from her mother-in-law, a woman who had raised so many children. And did about a job as Ethel did. "Well, dear," Rose Kennedy began, "you know, it's much more ladylike to cross one's legs at the ankle, not at the knee." In that particular moment, it's likely that Ethel didn't find Rose's counsel very helpful. But this is the typical response, you know. We got a freaking emergency. That's like in the movie with Bogart and Hepburn on the river in Africa. I think it's in there. Or I forget, one of these colonial things where the Victorian woman, "Be careful with my tea set, be careful with my tea set," as the Indians are shooting arrows at us. They can't deal with any kind of real problems. So they deal with, "That's inappropriate. You should have your legs at the ankles, not the knees." Okay, generally accounts of her life over the years have had it that Ethel Kennedy raised a truly unruly bunch. It's not entirely true. The fact is, she had 11 children, and of them, only 3 presented real problems: the eldest boy, Joe, Bobby, and David. The rest were generally well behaved, though some of her other sons would find themselves in trouble from time to time. Yeah, well, I think Michael is a younger brother. I think that's the one who committed suicide, or excuse me, drug overdose, I believe. So, yeah, Michael LeMoyne. Then there's Mary Kerry. So Kerry Kennedy. I've seen Rory's name as well. Oh yeah, she's in she does film, documents and stuff. But no, the girls, see, they didn't pose any problem for her because they never got involved where the cops might be called. Or, where she's got the entire neighborhood calling her about the havoc that her sons are creating. So for her and everybody else, they found that they ended up just fine. Now they did. I mean, Kerry was obviously abusive to her husband, Andrew Cuomo, and has done obviously a real, turned her daughters into carbon copies of their mother and their grandmother, and to real Kennedys. They should look to their father's mother. I mean, I did speak with her briefly, and a very, very charming woman, and obviously what I can read from that family, someone very dedicated to raising her children, her family, a real family, mother and wife, and so much more important than all the Hyannis Point beach houses and the pomp and circumstance of what the Kennedys sacrificed so much to get, because they're one of the, as I say, they're not of the robber barons, because this is not the Rockefellers, the Vanderbilts, that, but they they're the poor Irish versions. And just, okay, we're going to come to the New World and cash in. So there was this, I'm not going to read through all of this, but it was, they got, who was it? I forget. They got busted for pot. Actually, they sold, I mean, they sold a couple of joints to somebody who asked them, you have some joints that I can buy off of you. I mean, it wasn't like they were going around, really trafficking, but the guy offered them a lot of money. Like, of course, I can buy a bag of weed for that price. It should have also said, ding, 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 why would somebody be offering me so much for a joint? So anyway, I mean, then again, you have these rich kids all over there who, yeah, I want a joint here. What do you want for it? You got one here. So, you got to look at the, so anyway, they did get busted. But what was really, really funny here was the reaction of Ethel. Let's see. Okay. In the 1960s and 70s, rampant drug use among American youth had increased by troubling leaps and bounds. Well, might have just gone from alcohol to drugs, marijuana. Then it gets into other stuff. The list of fallen adolescents included a growing number of sons and daughters of prominent families, and the Kennedys were not immune to the trend. Sergeant Shriver had always recognized that recreational drugs were widely used in the Cape Cod area, and at one point he and Eunice had considered sending their sons elsewhere for the summer for that very reason. However, Eunice had said that she felt doing so would be copping out, just to keep her children away from the temptation. See, I did more than just a summer. I went and had kids and kept them out of this in its entirety. I mean, they were thrown into this type of world when we lived in Bogota, and we had a bodyguard and a bulletproof car, and my ex, he was the director, had a prestigious position in the bank there, so we, and I had a role before that. Yeah, we were expats, but how should I say, not amongst the kind of the the upper crust ruling elite and rubbing shoulders with all of those in Paris or Brussels. I mean, we had a nice house, but those weren't our entourages or friend or contemporary people that, because in Paris it was a BBB, just had I think they had 2 succursales. In Brussels, they just had 1 small office that worked mainly with the European Union. So I mean, we were small fries there. But when we get to Bogota, so there we're in this, and I mean, for me, I'm like, well, yeah, I walked away from that in Washington. Well, in the United States, the East Coast, con mucho gusto. I mean, I didn't embrace it. As I say, I was a princess in a pea. I couldn't tell you, had to live a life and read a lot of books to be able to put it into exactly perspective and the big picture of what the problem is. But as I say, copping out, it would be copping out just to keep children away from that. Well, maybe I copped out, but now I'm back. And I want to clean up Dodge City, and I want to clean up my country, because I do want my children to come and no, because they are Americans, and it's absolutely disgusting the way that my government and my family and friends have hung them out to dry and hung me out to dry, and why women and children in the United States and the Western world have become rightsless, statesless people, as the literature of the feminists themselves shows. So nowhere is it safe, really, she'd say. The country is riddled with drugs from one end to the other. I think protection has to come from within the family itself. Eunice just hoped she had given her children the pride, guts, and the devotion to God and man that would keep them out of harm's way. I mean, you know, their parents may not be smoking pot, but they're drinking their martinis and their champagne. You know, their partying is just fine wine and fine dining instead of beer kegs, smoking joints, and bags of potato chips. In fact, so the two Bobbies, Kennedy and Shriver, had been smoking pot on and off for at least the better part of the last year. Of course, how could I have misjudged things so badly, Eunice now wondered. Because you're out in your la-la land of what your world is about and what your children's world is about. That night, there was a lot of hysterics at the compound as Eunice and Ethel, mostly Ethel, lit into their sons. About 2 days later, Sergeant Shriver, who had been in California, flew in to deal with the matter and to get more information as to what exactly transpired. After 2 days of being screamed at, oh Lord, with my brother and sister, or the whole, when my parents were still alive, and there was some issues. 3 days of them screaming and yelling, you know, on I mean, this guy, I just had Skype, not Zoom. I keep on saying, if you people don't calm down and explain to me what the problem is, that's all I can do. Because, you know, each of them want me to side with the other, or with them. Each of them want me to side with them and oppose the other. I'm like, well, I don't even know what you're talking about. 3 days of arguments. And I'm dealing with a shit show here and a shit show in Washington. And when I was like, oh my God, I cannot believe you guys. You know, unfortunately, as much as my siblings have criticized, and everybody else I know bashed, you know, hated their parents, criticized their parents, yet they've just reproduced, become carbon copies of their parents. Can't deal with any problems, can't deal with any kind of situation. So let's just deny. And then when the everything explodes, gotta bring in Sergeant Shriver, a male presence, to try and figure out what the hell's going on here. It's a setup, Ethel exclaimed when she finally heard the details about how the arrest happened. See, he had to talk to the boys after 2 days of having their mother scream at them to find out what exactly happened. Because if you don't know exactly what transpired, you're not going to know how to deal with it. So, it's a setup, Eunice agreed. Apparently, a policeman from Boston had gone undercover as a hippie taxi driver named Andy Mose, and over the course of a couple of weeks, gave the two cousins and some of their friends free rides around Hyannisport in order to earn their trust. He even drove them to parties and observed their behavior, drinking beer and scotch. Then, during the course of one evening, he asked if they had any pot they might sell him. He offered them $10 a joint. Not bad, the boys decided. They each had a little stash and gave Mose a couple of joints. Of course, they got arrested. Eunice felt the operation was illegal and constituted entrapment. And it did. It did. Ethel agreed, saying that their boys had been targeted because they were Kennedys and that the family should not stand for it. Though Sergeant did his best to reason with them, it was pretty useless. According to a family member in the home at the time, Sergeant maintained that the police were simply doing their job and the Kennedy youths shouldn't be let off the hook, even if they had been tricked. I agree there. Sarge also wasn't convinced that they had been targeted, since 27 other youths had also been caught in the same dragnet operation involving Andy Mose. They shouldn't be buying it, smoking it, or selling it, no matter what, Sarge maintained. These kids are smoking pot. That's the issue. See how the women developed the alibi that, you know, that, and they're deviating attention away from the real problem of these kids smoking pot, rather than how they had been entrapped and how they're going to get their kids off scot-free for doing naughty deeds. And also, it was a dragnet operation, Hyannis Point. What they were doing was targeting not just Kennedy kids, but the rich, entitled kids of that era that they knew were, you know, doing illegal stuff, just like everybody else who was getting, you know, kids in the ghettos. It's okay. We arrest them for selling pot or smoking pot, but not our rich kids. So, you know, it was to make an example, because of course this is just to make the police in the United States look good. So they do some of this stuff every once in a while. But of course, it's chump change compared to what's going on. And see, back then it was smoking pot. Now it'd be like, as long as there's no cocaine, I'm not gonna bother. Kids drinking alcohol, and well, the schools, prep schools, I guess, are getting well, because it's such a problem. I mean, 6 girls got kicked out of Foxcroft shortly before the COVID shutdown. One of them was the head of school. I don't know if it was drinking or drugs or something, but substance abuse. Is Fox? No, but then Foxcroft won't give me a voice a year later in their courageous conversations, because I'm not politically correct. I'm not willing to promote la vie en rose. If you go to Foxcroft, your life is guaranteed to be a success, as you know, that's the propaganda that these courageous conversations are giving a voice. And it's to the Black girls. I mean, as my younger sister, she said, oh my God, you would have thought she was like, oh my God, the reunion, it was so pro-Black. I was like, yeah, and you know, Black, it's basically what it is Foxcroft, as you know, everybody else, it's the minoritist and the feminists. I mean, it's a girls' school, and it was, yeah, I was told when I was college, I didn't know that before, but when I said I'd gone to Foxcroft, they said, oh, that's a lesbian school, as Smith is supposed to be. So, you know, it's like, I have no problem with lesbian women and the sexuality, but I have a problem when they target me because I'm not a lesbian and I don't, you know, how is this any different than, you know, if we don't want to live like the you know, the lesbian control freak, or the feminist control freak, heterosexual, or the Black, brown, yellow, or white control freak narcissist who just wants to keep up with the Joneses, grapple up the ladder of success, and show everybody how successful they are because of all of the wealth that they've accumulated. If you don't buy into that agenda, you're to be silenced and you have no rights. Now, I fail to see how that's democratic and promoting the principles of democracy, or liberating anybody. It's just changing the skin color and gender of the dictators in power. Ethel became quiet, but not Eunice. Well, I think we should sue, Eunice angrily told her husband, standing toe to toe with him. For what? Sargent wanted to know. See, these little ladies, they don't need to have any basis for a lawsuit. They're gonna sue. They're gonna sue. That's why it's so dangerous to have these lawyers out there who are willing to instigate or initiate malicious litigation when there is no foundation, and it's considered normal practice. No, it's an abuse of the courts. This is serious stuff when you get into Constitution and Bill of Rights issues and international conventions. My God, I can see you are going to be totally useless in this thing, aren't you? A flabbergasted Eunice shot back at her husband. This is not the time to be a nice guy, Sarge, she said, obviously alluding to his reputation as a bit of a softie. This is the time to get mad. This is the time to fight back. Sue the people who arrested your son rather than address the problem of what's going on with your children. Sargent was determined to keep his head, saying that he felt it would set a bad example for the boys if the adults went up against law enforcement on this matter. Of course, perhaps it was true that the boys' names shouldn't have been revealed. Again, of course, he conceded, since that seemed a violation of Massachusetts law. Yes, and that if Eunice and Ethel or anybody had been upset about that, and went, because obviously that would have been released by the told by the police station to the press, I would have gone after the police as well as the press who had, mentioned that, because these are minor children. And as they say, a violation of Massachusetts law. So see, Ethel and Eunice, nobody's gonna, go, let's use the law to address a real concern that these minor children's names were obviously told to the press. That's not, as I say, that he says that's Massachusetts law. I mean, that gets into local laws, but I think it should be. You shouldn't. The police, particularly when it's minor children, there is a protection there. Okay, so however, he saw no recourse other than for the family to just get tougher on the boys and deal with the real issue at hand, their recreational use of marijuana. Well, are their parents recreationally using alcohol? Setting the example for these kids. Now it's not in marijuana, it's gotten to cocaine. And my in the 80s, it became the cocaine. Now we got opioid. Until you get to the root cause of this, it won't stop. The family managed to keep the embarrassing story under wraps until early August, when a hearing into the matter was scheduled. On August 5th, Ethel, Eunice, and Sarge, as well as Ted, accompanied their sons to Barnstable for private juvenile proceedings. Of course, the scene was pure pandemia during the dreaded walk from the family's car to the Barnstable District Courthouse, with television cameras grinding, reporters calling out questions, strangers staring, and everyone shoving. For much of the time, Ethel seemed close to tears, while Eunice looked incredibly annoyed. See, this was the objective, really, of the sting operation, to snare somebody like the Kennedy family. Because believe me, this area, there are quite a bit of these families. And make an example, because then it gets into the press, and you have this stuff of see, we aren't just tough on the inner city kids, we're tough on our rich kids as well. But it's not true. I know it's not true. Oh Lord. And I mean, I didn't do any of this stuff. Of course I tried cocaine. I mean, let's see, can't remember if I was in college or in high school. I think it was, I forget, but maybe my senior year or so. But are you kidding? Everybody around me is doing it. Particularly when I get to college. I mean, whoa. And I didn't realize it. I mean, I was an intern on Capitol Hill, but I later found out, because as I say, I work mornings. 3 hours, I get in, open the mail, leave, and get to school and stuff like that. So I never, I didn't socialize with people who worked in the office, because I mean, occasionally during holiday things or but I wasn't full-time all the time on the Hill and in these offices and seeing all of that. But I later found out it was going there. It was going on in the financial markets. Again, that was after college. I was like, I'm finished with all, God, you people are crazy. All you want to do is party. Just a little bit. Sure, when you're 16, 17, even 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, there's some allure there. After that, you should be growing out of it. unfortunately, my generation never grew out of it. That's all. And you can see, I mean, that was a big problem with Andrew Cuomo. He didn't like to go to Hyannis Point. He didn't like to hang out with the family, the Kennedy family. And this was the same with my ex-husband and his family. Because at first I have, this is the Spanish family, big Spanish family. Everybody is the cousins and they're always together. And now, Stockholm syndrome. See, this is also how you keep them within an abusive Latino. I mean, this is, or the Muslim families is the same. It's that extended family unit. It is very, very supportive of the members and helps the members when it is supportive, but very destructive to everybody, because it does create this Stockholm syndrome for the different members who become, trapped. One reason I went to Europe, get away from my wacko family and everything that was going on. I mean, it wasn't just the 1980s. It was what was going on with my mother and my family, my parents in Louisiana. That's a whole other corruption case. I mean, believe me, got a great saga of corruption in America that reads better than Dynasty in Dallas put together with my stories. But of course, nobody in the publishing world, in the West at least, wants that being exposed. So I'm silenced and marginalized and have people play sati games with me while the legal community sits by, getting rich off of going after people like Andrew Cuomo, Prince Andrew, playing games like that so they can stuff their pockets, and the people are getting more and more pissed off. So for much of the time, Ethel seemed close to tears while Eunice looked incredibly annoyed. Sergeant Ted seemed resigned to the moment. Of course, what he could do. Both boys looked sheepish. My Uncle Teddy gets away with stuff. How come we can't? Bobby Kennedy had asked his mother earlier in the day. He was obviously referring to Chappaquiddick. Don't you dare bring your uncle into this, she told him angrily. This has nothing to do with him. But see, I wanted to read this as well, because see the example that Chappaquiddick. Now, they're busting these boys for pot, for selling a couple of joints of pot, yet his father is getting away. As I say, it was an accident, so, but he did, I'd have to, consult with prosecutor or something, exactly what, that would get into second degree murder. But it is definitely a felony. I mean, that's serious crap. No, he gets away with that, and the boys get busted for selling a couple of joints. No, the boys are right. He gets away with murder, or why can't we? And this is, of course, why, for example, Joe at the bed and breakfast, Daggett house, said, you can't, I'm a Kennedy, I can do anything I want. Well, because this is the example that they got from their parents and their uncles and their grandparents. So, trickle down. It does work. In Indeed, there was a consequence of Chappaquiddick that was very personal to third generation Kennedys. There was a pervasive feeling amongst many of the generation, especially some of the sons of John, Bobby, and Ted, that their uncle had gotten away with a crime. Yes, it was a felony. Accidents happen, of course. However, there are usually consequences, especially if a death occurs. Yet in the case of the senator and Mary Jo Kopechne, not sure how you pronounce it, it seemed to some of the younger generation that there hadn't been much of a penalty. No, none. I mean, okay, he wasn't able to become a US president, but he did become a senator and hang out in Washington extremely long time, cashing on that one. And the rise of the Fourth Reich and the depth of the liberal class of which he has been a part. Indeed, in years to come, this kind of warped thinking would wreak havoc in the lives of some of that next generation of Kennedys. In the end, the judge gave the boys a year of probation, standard treatment for first offenders, and then sent them on their way. I don't think Ted got any kind of probation or anything. After the hearing, both Bobbies were quite embarrassed and feeling very guilty and sorry about the whole matter. Unfortunately, Bobby Kennedy didn't have a father who might try to help him make sense of what had occurred. He just had Ethel, who was already pushed beyond her limits as a mother, and she wasn't able to be much a help to him. No, pushed beyond her limits. She was a spoiled, narcissistic, entitled little girl who didn't know how to deal with any problems. Gonna marry into this great Kennedy family where we're gonna be presidents, and oops, no, they both got shot. Now I'm stuck with 11 kids. She didn't know how to handle anything. And paradoxically, see, that's why everybody hates me and everybody wants to silence me and cancel me, because they do know I can step in the biggest freaking mess that you people leave behind and make an order out of it. And everybody I know knows that and why they don't want me in there raining on the parade. If Bobby thought he was going to have a meaningful dialogue with her about the temptations and peril of drug use, he was wrong. I don't think he was under any illusions. Instead, Ethel just ripped into him that night, chasing him all over the compound until finally catching up to him and pushing him head first into shrubbery. Give me strength, she screamed up at the sky as she headed back to her home. After that, Ethel didn't want to talk about the matter at all. In fact, the subject never came up again, except for Ethel's tearful declaration that all these kids are bad kids and I don't think there's anything we can do about it. Of course, well, Eunice Shriver, she was upset with her son Bobby. I'm quite cross with you now, as she put it. However, Bobby Shriver had something that Bobby Kennedy didn't have, and it made all of the difference in the world. He had Sergeant Shriver as a father. See, even with neurotic, crazy moms like Eunice and Ethel Kennedy, when there's a father in the picture, has a head on his shoulders, he can help compensate and bring things back. Sarge took his son into his study, sat him down with him, and told him that while this had certainly been a bad situation, it most definitely wasn't the end of the world. You're not a bad kid, and I don't care what anyone says, he told him. In fact, you're a great kid. I know you learned your lesson, and I'm not worried about it at all, he told him, according to Bobby's later recollection. And I don't want you to listen to a thing anyone else has to say around here, because you and your brothers and sisters are not bad kids, he added, maybe referring to Ethel's comment. We're going to get through this thing, son, and I know it won't happen again. I want you to know that I trust you, Sargent said. And for Bobby Shriver, it never did happen again. In fact, he considers this troubling episode a defining moment in his life. He realized how lucky he was to have a father like Sargent, and how truly sad it was that his cousin Bobby didn't have someone to guide him through this difficult terrain. True, Bobby had his Uncle Ted, but apparently Ted wasn't able to make much of an impression on him. Bobby Shriver vowed to never again let his dad down. Sargent and Eunice Shriver also made a decision to try and keep their children away from Ethel's three eldest, Joe, Bobby, and David. That wasn't going to be easy. They were all great friends, but whenever possible, the Shrivers did what they could to separate, even if gently, the Kennedy boys from the Shrivers. This is sad because, and I have to say, this is the typical reaction, as I say, when Bobby Kennedy had been sent to live on a tent kicked out of the house and opted for a tent on the beach. As I say, right then and there, I would be like, okay, come on in. You're not sleeping on the beach. You're going to sleep in a bed in my house, and I'm going to be over talking to your mom tomorrow about what we're going to do. If there had been somebody around like that, but this is the typical, we'll just remove these kids from the influence of Ethel Kennedy's sons. And that's just alienating them even more from any kind of person with a head in the situation, which it seems to me, Sergeant Shriver, I have to look more in, I don't know how much I agree with his politics, but it just, one generation after another has had has been given a very, very bad example to follow from their parents and the preceding generation, and have become, more and more, or maybe there's just more of them. I saw there was some of the Kennedy, I forget, it's got to be Mariah, Cara, and Michaela's cousins, and they're in lingerie type stuff, half nude, drinking, they're underage, on an Instagram thing. But that's okay. And we're Kennedys, we can do anything we want. We're Kennedys, we can do anything we want. See, at least Queen Elizabeth, her children were not brought up with that mentality. Now, that's the flip side of the coin, where her children have just been pawns in her queenship. I mean, she's also the longest running monarch, second to Queen Victoria, but just a repeat of the Queen Victoria era, and why the British Crown, they are successfully attacking them right now through Prince Andrew, through Prince Harry, right? Queen Elizabeth, should be screaming bloody murder, like I am, in both case of her son and her grandson. And now I saw they're going after Prince Charles. I think they're going to try and push for his abdication. This is, this is Parliament. It's over some, I don't know. They said I forget. It's a Middle Eastern guy, and he gave him, I don't know, it's knighthood or one of these it named him something. They're always just passing out awards to anybody and everybody. And apparently they're claiming it was in exchange for money. I don't think that was the case. I think there was business deals and this that were separate. Now they're just trying to say one was in exchange for the other. But it doesn't mean that, it doesn't matter if there's any evidence. Just what matters is what they can sell in the press and to the people. And, because the end game is to get an abdication there, because it's only, men in line. I mean, you've got first Charles, then Andrew, then Edward. Well, wait a second. Charles, then William, Charles's son. And then there's William's children. I can't remember, but yeah, but then Prince Andrew, Prince Edward, yeah, it's all boys. And if you see with the Spanish royal family, I mean, Reina Sofia and Juan Carlos are up creek without a paddle, because what I demonstrate is got some dumb bimbo. I mean, everybody always in Spain told me that their daughters were retarded because of, inbreeding of the royals. That everybody always, no, all of these people are stupid because it was inbreeding of the royals. Well, we don't have the inbreeding stuff going on in the United States, and they keep on getting stupider and stupider. So obviously this is not just a problem with inbreeding. This is coming from the narcissism and psychopath epidemic that what we got going on now parallels the Gilded Age and then the flapper era, which ended in the crash of 29 and the Great Depression, which is where we're headed now. So Reina Sofia and all of the little ladies of the Spanish royal family hadn't been so busy covering up for the abuse and the violent temper of Juan Carlos, because he killed, I mean, okay, we can say it was an accident, but excuse me, no. Anybody who handles a gun, he shot his brother when he was 18 and his brother was 14, because his brother had won, I forget, I think it was golf. I forget if it was tennis or golf tournament, junior. Jealousy. I mean, I saw the competition that my mother-in-law instilled between her two sons, and how it has been so destructive, or particularly to my ex-husband, but highly dysfunctional. And his brother, his younger brother, always jealous of him, and just has wanted to destroy him as much as my sisters and my mother have wanted. They were just on board with my husband from day one. It doesn't surprise me, but it just shows you that the American families, whether they be Catholic or whatever the religion, European families, Catholic, from the Christian religions, are no different than the Muslims, where the girls are sold into marriage and belong to the husbands, and they can kill them if they want. It's their property, as are the children of that man. I mean, it is documented in the literature that the feminist movement of the past 60, 70 years has completely eroded the rights of women and children in Western societies. And to complement that comes so that's the NGOs, the people in government who are supposed to be addressing those problems. But then on the other side, you have the women, the wives and the mothers, and the women in the society who want to cover everything up and hush, 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 and silence victims. And my case is a perfect, I'm getting it from my family and friends from Foxcroft. And again, this is not, I'm not a rags to riches story. I do come from the upper crust, and I'm sitting on a $10 billion lawsuit, but I'm headed, my money's going to run out soon. I don't know, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'll end up, as everybody has intended for the past 15 years, whether it be my ex-husband, my lawyers in the courts in Spain, the NGOs in Spain, because I've been knocking on those doors just as much as in the United States. They're all complicit. I prepared everything for the international courts, can clean this up, but no one will submit. Instead, they just bully me, they denigrate me, and they try and silence me. This is political persecution. And if I was a woman in Afghanistan or Iraq or someplace in the East, the American press, the Western press would be all over it. But since it's happening in the West, nobody wants to touch it with a 10-foot pole. Unfortunately, for everybody in the cesspool who just keeps on playing this, I mean, Andrew Cuomo should have got my letter by now. So I guess he's not interested either. I mean, which is unfortunate because other than him, I don't see any true leadership in anybody who has the knowledge, the experience, and the administrative, leadership abilities that he demonstrated during COVID to prevent the country from descending into another civil war. So, I don't know. It's in God's hands. I just keep on going. Look, it's in God's hands. I don't think he brought us all of this way to see us self-destruct. Who knows? All I know is when my time comes, I can at least go to the pearly gates and go, look, I did everything possible. And if you wouldn't bring me my children when I was on the earth, at least when they get to pearly gates, let them in, or rest of them go down to hell and let their souls burn on in hell. I mean, everybody's willing to crapshoot the future of the planet, all of our children, just so they can continue jet setting and going shopping. Now, in the aftermath of, World War II, the Auschwitz, and the horrors that had gone on during the Third Reich, the world was horrified, Americans particularly, about the atrocities that had gone on, with the German people turning a blind eye to everything because they were too busy cashing in and partying. Washington's no different than Berlin. Everybody was horrified. Yet now it's normal. Doesn't horrify anybody. It's the way of the world. So, again, Merrick Garland, Attorney General and Director of the FBI, Wray. Here's a whole slew of other domestic violence extremists, several generations who have been complicit and responsible for the escalating violence and civil unrest in this country. Bottom line is the little ladies don't want it exposed how dysfunctional they are, as well as them being bad mothers, them being bad wives, them being totally amoral people who use everybody around them as just a pawn in their little Machiavellian games to attain wealth and a compound on Hyannis Point, or spend summers in Martha's Vineyard and East Palm Beach. Not West Palm Beach, East Palm Beach. Or Saint-Tropez, or, any of that. It was a timeshare, an apartment, but it was a timeshare in Portobanos, which is the Saint-Tropez of the Costa del Sol near Marbella. It's right next to Marbella. I couldn't stand one out there. I was like, and we had been there for years and years and before, because his parents had bought a place in Estepona, which is a little bit farther. It's not Portobanos, but it's the poor people will go there. The poor people, when I'm talking poor people, the ones who don't have, who don't have $1 million to lay down for a holiday, a vacation home, just 100,000, 200,000. And his parents got involved in one of these things. Buy it before it's typical stuff in Spain. Buy it before it's even constructed. That's how they finance it. But then, of course, by the time it's constructed and they get the place, the market's collapsed and it's worth less than what they paid for it. So they hold on to it. His parents ended up with a place. I think they had it for 10 years or something like that. They would only use it once a year to go in August, for the month of August. So I do not have great memories of those vacations. But I was like, you guys are crazy. Rent this out. You're spending, because you've got there's the fee, it was a conjunto with a swimming pool. So they have to, I said, what you pay every year just in the conjunto fee, you could rent this place for a month to come on vacation. And you don't block your investment money. This is ludicrous. Rent the place out this is vacation territory. This is near Marbella, rented out. Even if you put it with one of these agencies, oh, the agencies take a lot. Yeah, even if they take 50% and they rent it out 7 months out of the year, or even 4 or 5 months, you're still at a positive cash flow of what you're checking out now. And if you don't want to eat the profit, the loss, and take your losses and just assume, at least try to make this place pay for itself, because of course over the years it also needed the reforms before they sold it. I mean, you see this all the time, done repeatedly. I'm like, how can you people be conned so many freaking times? The whole banking system and financial markets is a mess, but consumers out there also have to start being a little bit more responsible and using their noggin when they're investing their money and spending their money. So, until all of these problems are addressed, and this comes from dysfunctional parenting. Women like Ethel Kennedy, Eunice, Kerry Kennedy, Foxcroft mothers, my mother. I mean, let me count the ways. That was one of the things that I promised I would not do to my children. And I'm the only one, my entourage, who I know who broke the cycle. And that's another reasons why everybody has canceled me, because they know what a great mom I was, what a great wife I was. So this is just, I mean, they're loving this, because of course this is proof that I'm a useless person, that I was a bad mom, that I was a useless parasitic wife, that I, can't even, hold down a minimum wage job without my breadwinner husband. But the reality is totally different. It's because I had a corrupt court system that violated my rights that happened. And the agenda was to humiliate me, to marginalize me, to label me as an undesirable and an untouchable, just like in the Indian stratified. And what I show in examining the mediation process, which Laura Nader in Life of Law clearly shows has done a lot of detriment to the American legal system and court system. Whatever. I mean, it's see, I'm comfortable enough in my skin, and I know enough about my enemies, and that's also what scares them, because I got the dirt. See, when we got into all of this, this is why normally victims, particularly of respectable families, they'll go and look for a new meal ticket and just walk away from their kids and everything. We see it time and time again. I mean, Lady Catherine Meyer did that. Because they don't, because if well, wait a second, what's the truth here? Then if there was court corruption, if all of this was bullshit, and he was abusive, and they're just doing this to cover up his abuse, which is the case, you know, what they're gonna, you know, then everything about me and my life will, you know, anybody wants to bring me down and discredit me, they'll pull that out. And I said from the very beginning, I mean, back in 2008, and I said it to the lawyers, and I said it to some of the ladies in my neighborhood who signed perjurious letters. I mean, these ladies, they want to take away my home, my children, and 15 years of my life. Tit for tat. You crap shot your own home. And you got involved with criminal activity that could very well give you a 15-year sentence in jail. All to be a little bitch to me. And to show that perfect mother, that perfect wife, to humiliate her and show in the neighborhood, and to propagate the rumor that I had been a drug addict since I was 12 years old, and that I was sitting in my house not working on a business, you know, garage, multi-million-dollar internet business for my garage, like the young kids in school. But in fact, I was drunk all day. Now, they are going to have also a problem with that, because I also would go to the gym. And when, you know, won't get into it, but when all the court stuff started, I spent 6 hours at the gym per day doing aerobics. I mean, I got lots and lots and lots and lots of people. One of the reasons why I went was, I mean, I knew I needed to get out of the house, really, because I was there for all year. My computers had been crashed, couldn't do anything with that. I only had electricity, heat had been turned off, my kids had been taken. I had 500 euros a month to live off of. Now, everybody who works in the court system, 500 euros a month is enough to live off of in Spain. Okay, fine. Let's see. Judges, 500 euros. Well, shouldn't the other people be earning less? So what are the court clerks going to be getting 200, 250 a month? Sounds fair to me. I mean, you guys set the standards, so we'll play by your standards. We'll play by your rules. I mean, that's how I handle people. You want to play hardball with me? I play hardball with you. You know, Isabel didn't scream or scurry. Isabel, she ate the bear. So anyway, that's you know, everybody's crap shooting their farms, and we're getting down to the wire. Whatever. Okay. Have a nice evening. As I say, I don't know what God's plan is. I guess he's got some, but if something doesn't give pretty soon, we're gonna have a bloodbath. Real bloodbath. And I'm not threatening anybody. God, whenever anybody pulls that one out on me, oh, I really want to jump down their throats. Idiots. I'm telling you what's gonna happen if you keep on acting like Ethel and Eunice Kennedy. This is the reason why women have been kept out of positions of power. See, in this case, totally incapable of dealing with any kind of problem, anything. Calling the men, but then Ethel Kennedy, she's a tough lady. No, she's not. She may spit and she may swear, and she may know how to talk about, sports, and go out and shoot guns with the men, give the appearance of being a tough lady. Not that makes you tough. And as I say, Ethel will probably be gone by the time we get everything to court, but Kerry Kennedy and her daughters will be around, as will those generations. And as I say, if this isn't done in a court of law and people start getting justice through legal systems, it will be extremely violent. And these young girls, raping and pillaging will be happening in your homes. Something to think about. Have a nice evening. Wear your masks. I am sick and tired. I mean, everybody, well, no, it's my right to walk around without a mask. Well, you know what? I have to. Why isn't it the people who are not wearing masks who are walking away from me? No, I have to zigzag through the sidewalks to avoid and walk out on the street sometime to avoid everybody who doesn't have a mask on. Now, where's the violation of my rights to be able to walk down the street, the sidewalk, without having to avoid everybody because they might, just because they want to walk around without a mask, they might not be vaccinated and they might have the virus. For me, my job, since nobody will give me a job to help clean up the cesspool in Washington, and so I just sit here and document all the crap that's going on. My job, and every citizen's job who does not have a job in the government to clean this crap up, or a necessary job, even if you have a necessary job, our jobs as American citizens during the pandemic has to make sure that we do not get it, and our children, anybody who's dependent on us, do not get it, so that the healthcare system is not overwhelmed like it has been. The narcissism epidemic in this country is costing lives, and costing a lot of lives, and prolonging the mortality rates. I mean, we're getting, again, all you little narcissists, this gets into crimes against humanity. Food for thought. There will be a day of reckoning, here on earth or in heaven. Good night.